time, the rest of the senators have apprised us that they will be following shortly. So with that, the public hearing of the Committee on Foreign Relations is hereby called to order. And the previous meeting having merely been suspended, we shall proceed even without a quorum and dispense with that requirement. Let's call on Attorney Dana Alberto, our Legislative Committee Secretary, to acknowledge the presence of our resource persons, guests, and others. Thank you.
Good morning. The Committee on Foreign Relations would like to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished guests, namely, from the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have Secretary Enrique A. Manalo, Ambassador Jose Manuel Babe G. Romualdez, Assistant Secretary Jose Victor Chan Gonzaga, Assistant Secretary Marshal Louis M. Alferez.
If you don't mind, there are quite a few people in the room. Please raise your right hand so that you identify yourself. Salamat. Yes, Asek Alferez. Thank you.
Assistant Secretary Eileen Mendiola Rao, Assistant Secretary Ariel R. Peñaranda,
Sorry, who's that? Oh, please take your seat, please. Yes,
okay.
there are quite a few chairs still available. Okay. Please proceed.
From the Department of National Defense, we have Secretary Gilberto C. Teodoro Jr., Senior Undersecretary Ineneo C. Espino, Undersecretary Ignacio B. Madriaga. Okay. From the National Security Council, National Task Force, West Philippine Sea, we have Deputy Director General Nestor C. Erico. From the Department of Justice, we have Attorney Freddy G. Ganchon.
Morning, Madam Chair.
From the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we have General Romeo S. Bronner Jr., PA. Okay. VADM Torribo D. Adasi Jr., PN. Okay. MGen Ferdinand T. Barandon, PA. From the Department of Health, we have Assistant Secretary Maylene Beltran, Director Laura Angelia
I'm sorry,
Saison.
can we go back a little bit? There's Admiral Roy Vicente Trinidad. Is he here? Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you, sorry. I didn't see you. Okay. Yes, Department of Health, Asek Beltran.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Director Laura Angelia Saison, Director Arnold G. Alindada, Undersecretary Maria Rosario Singh Vergeri. From the Philippine Coast Guard, we have CG ADM Ronnie Gil Gavan.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
From the
Yes.
National Maritime Council, we have Captain Armil Angeles PN.
Thank you.
We have also Mr. Vince Dizon.
I'm sorry. Vince, okay. What's your position and who are you representing this morning?
Invited me,
Yes, as the vaccine czar.
well, as deputy to Secretary Galvez at that time.
Okay,
Opo.
thank you.
Okay. We also have virtual presence of Professor Jonathan Ong
Thank you. I see you.
and Dr. Daniel R. Lucy, MD.
Thank you very
Okay.
much, Dr. Lucy.
Yes. That will be all, Madam Chair.
You also have indicated the ICT Director Reyes. Dana, you also indicated the ICT Director Reyes. I don't think they've been called. NBI Law Talk and CICC USEC Alex Ramos. Are you here? They aren't here. Yeah, they're highlighted. So there's no one from the cyber or ICT community? Yes.
Director
Director
Jose
Reyes, oh, you're
Carlos
here.
P.
Okay.
Reyes.
Pero wala rito si NBI Law Talk? Wala ring si CICC, si Alex Ramos?
Wala po.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, all right. Any of the stakeholders that need to be here Vince, you're the only one, Professor Jonathan Ong, and Dr. Lucy. Thank you. We're done with that acknowledgement. Pursuant to Section 2 of the Rules of Procedure governing inquiries in aid of legislation, granting the Senate committee the power to initiate inquiries if the matter is within the committee's purview, the Committee on Foreign Relations hereby calls this inquiry in aid of legislation on the following issues. First, given the difference in the time zone, we start with the alleged anti-vaccine propaganda by the military of the United States of America during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thereafter, the Ayungin Shoal incident on 17 June, resulting in injuries to the Philippine Navy personnel, and such other matters as may be related to vaccines, rotation and reprovisioning, and other cyber attacks and hacking that have been alleged. The so-called great power competition is reaching a boiling point, and unfortunately, our country and our people are already starting to pay dearly because of it. In today's hearing, the committee will attempt to examine how both sides in this emerging new Cold War have manipulated to a certain degree our country and many of the information channels, putting people at risk and threatening the survival of the nation in many cases. Last June 14, Reuters reported a deliberate and clandestine anti-vaccination operation by the military of the United States to discredit China's Sinovac vaccines as a response to Beijing's efforts to blame the U.S. for the pandemic. It was alleged that the anti-vaccine effort was undertaken by the U.S. military and was designed to counter China's growing influence in the Philippines and other developing countries. The Reuters article mentioned that the campaign was conducted through fake internet accounts meant to impersonate Filipinos. And they identified at least 300 accounts on X, formerly Twitter, likely used for anti-vaccination campaigns. And these accounts were all created in the summer of 2020, centering on the slogan, #ChinaAngVirus. We must verify if the anti-vaccination and misinformation campaign was indeed orchestrated by the U.S. military. If verified, there is also a need to further determine the ramifications of the action of the U.S. military, any potential breach of international law, and any possible legal recourse available to the Philippines, considering that such anti-vaccination and misinformation campaigns threaten national security and, more importantly, the health of Filipinos. The next issue focuses on the incident last June 17, wherein a Philippine Navy sailor was seriously injured after Chinese vessels intercepted a resupply mission to BRP Sierra Madre. This incident marks a serious escalation in the aggressiveness of the People's Republic of China in intercepting Philippine rotation and resupply missions to Ayungin Shoal. And for the first time, Chinese personnel boarded Filipino military boats, took Filipino firearms, and seriously injured Filipino military personnel. This escalation took place despite the current strategies being employed by Filipino authorities, including the filing of diplomatic protests, the transparency campaign on rotation and resupply, the joint patrols being undertaken by the U.S. and other Filipino allies. There is a need, therefore, to further examine the events that took place on June 17 in order to determine how the government can better protect Filipino servicemen and citizens during rotation and resupply to Ayungin, and to ascertain the changes that should be made to current strategies employed by Philippine government in order to allow the country to more effectively and safely assert our sovereign rights. And with that, may the committee secretary therefore administer the oath to our resource persons so that we can begin.
Kindly stand and raise your right hand. Even those who are virtually present, please. I state your name. Do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this proceeding. Thank you. You may sit down.
Yes, I'd like to begin with the statement derived from the Pentagon regarding the Reuters article The Department of Defense, and this refers to the U.S. Department of Defense, conducts a wide range of operations, including operations of information environment, OIE, to counter adversary malign influence, DoD activities, including OIE, conducted outside areas of armed conflict. They are coordinated and deconflicted with other departments and agencies as appropriate. This process is deliberate, methodical, comprehensive, and several state and non-state actors use social media platforms and other media to spread disinformation and conduct malign influence campaigns against the U.S. The Department of Defense uses a variety of platforms, including social media, to counter malign influence attacks aimed at the U.S. allies and partners. As it relates to COVID-19 disinformation, China initiated a disinformation campaign to falsely blame the U.S. for the spread of COVID-19. And that's the U.S. Department of Defense statement following the article that appeared in Reuters. There is also a statement that was made public, and we are in receipt of as well, from the Chinese embassy in the Philippines regarding the U.S. military's secret psychological warfare of discrediting Chinese vaccines. And I would just like to quickly summarize the rather lengthy statement from China's embassy here in Manila. As a responsible major country, China provided global public goods such as vaccines to other countries during the COVID-19 pandemic. We were the first to provide COVID response supplies and vaccines to the Philippines. China and the Philippines have been mutually supportive and cooperative against the onslaught of the disease, making important contributions to the world's final victory over the pandemic. However, such cooperation was not as smooth as it was supposed to be. Obstruction and sabotage from a third country and certain forces happened all along. And this goes on to say that a plot doomed to failure as it went against the interests of both the Chinese and the Filipino people. More and more behind-the-scenes stories were being told by insiders following the end of the pandemic. And the above report, meaning the Reuters report, is one of the latest that connects the dots and tells a true story to the world. People around the world are indignant about the U.S. military's actions, laying bare the hypocrisy, malign intent, and double standards of the U.S. While talking about respecting human rights, the U.S. does the opposite regarding the fundamental human rights of life and death of Filipino people, thus exploiting the vulnerability of the Filipino people for its ulterior geopolitical motives. Yes, so they go on to warn that both the people of China as well as the Philippines should remain highly vigilant and clear-eyed, resist being taken in by disinformation and inflammatory rhetoric, define their own fate, and protect China-Philippine relations, as well as peace and stability in the South Seas. So we shall begin with the Twitter post. Please put them on, to which we refer. Yes, Secretary, please, if we may have the Twitter post to which we are referring, and so that everyone can have a look at them. Okay, I think most people can see it's a little bit far. Pwedeng lakihan. Yes, Dr. Daniel Lucy. Yes, Dr. Lucy, I see you. Yes,
Yes,
there.
hello, Senator.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Lucy. We start off with you, since you were one of the persons interviewed by the Reuters team, and you were a former military physician who assisted in the response to the 2001 anthrax attacks, as well as being an infectious disease specialist at Dartmouth's Geisel School of Medicine. So thank you very much for joining us. How were you interviewed by Reuters? Did they reach out to you personally, or was it through email or by phone?
Oh, They reached out to me. Honestly, I don't remember if there was a phone call or not, but yes, they reached out to me and asked me what I thought. I would just like to add, Senator, that I served in the U.S. Air Force only from 1988 to 1992 for 4 years. So the reference to my work during 2001 anthrax attacks in the U.S., I was a civilian physician, infectious disease physician at that time. I just wanted to clarify that I served 4 years on active duty from 1988 to 1992.
Yes, thank you for the clarification, Doctor. What were the questions asked by the Reuters team? Were you made aware that the interview was for an expose regarding clandestine information operations?
Well, I think that the Reuters interviewer was quite straightforward and factual, so I don't feel that there was any deception. He explained to me what the story was going to say and asked me if I had any reaction. And so, you know, I gave the statement that you find in the Reuters story from June 14th, because as an infectious disease physician, someone who's been involved with many epidemics starting in 1982 with the AIDS epidemic in the US, but going to China for SARS in 2003, for example, and actually, I went to China in February of 2020, but I was trying to get to Wuhan to help work in the hospitals in Wuhan, but I was not able to get there. I only got as far as Shanghai because Wuhan was already shut down, I think, as everyone knows, on January 23rd.
Thank you. Yes, so you said that they were fairly straightforward, and you were thereafter quoted by Reuters as saying, the effort to stoke fear about Chinese inoculations risked undermining overall public trust in government health initiatives. Can you explain your statement briefly?
I think my statement was more to the effect of that I did not think that what was being reported, if accurate, that it was defensible. I really didn't think that it was something that you know the U.S. government should have been doing. The Chinese Sinovac vaccine, I think, as everyone knows, did have safety and efficacy data published in peer-reviewed journals, and it was one of multiple vaccines that was approved for use by the World Health Organization. So I really didn't think that it was ethically, it was defensible to, if accurate, to have a disinformation program about this vaccine, which was made available obviously to the Philippines and to other countries as well by China.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Indeed, Sinovac was the first vaccine made available during the pandemic here in the Philippines. Do these types of disinformation and disinformation campaigns cause what is called vaccine hesitancy for those who are affected thereby?
Well, I can't speak directly for anyone, obviously, in the Philippines or in Central Asia or anywhere else in the world. But I think this was really disinformation. And I'm saying this, as an infectious disease physician. I'm a U.S. citizen. I, grew up in a military family. I served in active duty. But I think that the way it sounds to me is this disinformation about the Chinese Sinovac vaccine, which again was approved by the World Health Organization for use in countries around the world. It was well, the disinformation was, it sounds to me, to have been intended to make people hesitant to take the vaccine.
Yes, that certainly had that effect here in the Philippines. And until today, we're struggling with vaccine hesitancy for many other vaccines. In your experience as an infectious disease specialist, how significant a problem is vaccine hesitancy?
Well, I think that it's a significant problem in many countries. I can really only speak, to my own country, and certainly there was some vaccine hesitancy before COVID and before any COVID vaccines, but I think that it's probably been increased or amplified because of the controversies about COVID vaccines. And I'm speaking only for my own country, from my own experience in my own country. But clearly, before COVID, there was vaccine hesitancy, or even certain people in certain countries. And again, I'm talking about the United States, but certainly also some countries in Europe that I'm well aware of before COVID, where there were individuals who did not want to take certain vaccines, or in some cases, any vaccines at all. So vaccine hesitancy is a significant problem, but it began before COVID. And at least in my country, in the USA, I think that vaccine hesitancy has increased, and not only for COVID, increased during COVID, and not only for COVID vaccines, but in some instances for other vaccines as well.
Yes, Dr. Lucy, that's certainly been our experience in the Philippines as well, sadly. Thank you very much for your participation and your reiteration that if indeed the report cited is accurate, it is not defensible in any way and would be ethically wrong. Thank you, Dr. Lucy.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. I also would like to have had the participation of Facebook and X, formerly Twitter, in order to discuss the alleged takedown of several hundred posts clearly identified as part of the U.S. military operation. However, there doesn't seem to be any representative present. Committee Secretary, is that correct? Yes, we invited both Meta as well as X. May I know if we've heard from them at all?
We invited them, Senator Marcos, we invited them, Your Honor.
Yes, I understand we invited
but
them,
they,
have they responded in any way?
They responded. I was able to talk to the General Counsel. She was on maternity leave. She is on maternity leave, and she told me to send an email to another person, but at the same time it bounced back, right? The email bounced back.
Okay, so we
yes.
don't seem to have any reply from both Facebook and X. However, we have a reiteration from the lawyer of Reuters, a certain Christopher G. Lee, who says that as described in the news report, the U.S. military's influence program was global in nature, targeting countries across Central Asia, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. In relation to the Philippines, the U.S. military in 2020 and 2021 operated the clandestine propaganda campaign using phony internet accounts meant to impersonate Filipinos. In connection with that reporting, our newsroom independently identified at least 300 accounts on X, formerly Twitter, that matched descriptions shared by former military officials familiar with the Philippine operation. Almost all were created in the summer of 2020, and after Reuters brought this cluster of accounts to the attention of X in the course of our reporting, X determined that the accounts were inauthentic and suspended them in 2023. Posts by the accounts decry the quality, efficacy, and safety of Chinese face masks, COVID-19 test kits, as well as their vaccines. I think that is all we have with regard to that in the absence of both Meta and X. However, I think the article speaks for itself, wherein it indeed states that the patterns and the activities clearly indicate the participation of the U.S. military as well as the IP addresses. Now we turn to the Philippine government agencies, particularly those involved in the vaccination and cybersecurity program. Were you aware in the late 2020 period to the first half of 2021 that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of social media accounts intended to malign or discredit not only Sinovac, but Chinese face masks and other equipment? Is anyone aware of such social media accounts? Was there any activity reported to you in DOH? Perhaps Mr. Dizon now, who was also involved at least later on. May nabalitaan ba kayo na may ganitong pangyayari? Na may nagsasabi kahit unang-una yung Sinovac ay hindi maaasahan at pati yung mga face mask, pati yung mga ginagamit na PPE at ibang equipment ay hindi maaasahan. Yes, Yusek po?
Yes, good morning po, Madam Chair. Yes po, we have been monitoring this kind of social media issues where there was this kind of issues raised by the people or population, and we tried to address this by doing some form of directed town halls and assembly so that we can better inform our citizens.
So, Yusek, you were actually aware that there were posts, tweets, other misinformation over social media and other media here in the Philippines. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And the DOH action was to make people aware through different town halls and other media as well. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Did you not find these alarming, these tweets and posts? And beyond the town halls, was there any other action taken to stop these accounts and posts that were clearly undermining the effort of DOH at the time?
Yes, Madam Chair. We usually get this kind of issues not just for COVID, but even before the COVID pandemic started, because we had already these kind of issues regarding vaccines since 2016. So we tried addressing this.
By 2016, are you referring to Denvaxia po?
Yes, Madam Chair.
So mula pa nung Denvaxia, nagkakaroon na kayo ng problemang ganito, kaya medyo pamilyar na kayo.
Yes, Madam Chair.
At ang panlaban ninyo, naglalabas kayo ng impormasyon na tama.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Did you find it alarming?
During that time, Madam Chair, yes, because we were trying to have all our population vaccinated. So we really needed to intensify our efforts. So we also had some communication with the Facebook or Meta so that they will take down these different posts, because we do social listening 24/7 so that
Did
we
they?
can monitor. Yes, some of the posts were taken
Some
down.
of the posts were actually taken down. We recognize the arrival of Senator Padilla. As I recall, the frustration of of then President Duterte was such that he threatened to arrest people who wouldn't get vaccinated because we had such meager numbers. Tama po ba yun? Ganun kahirap vaccinate, magpabakuna nung panahon na yun?
Madam Chair, I would just like to also clarify. No, although yes, there was this hesitancy during that time, but the hesitancy rate declined throughout the months that we were vaccinating. It started off that there was this high hesitancy rate, but came January of 2022, the hesitancy went down to just 8% among the population.
Tama, tama. I recall that development, and DOH was very successful in convincing people, but that is a 6-month lag. That's really quite a long lag. So they did stop the accounts, or at least take down some of the few that you identified. And do you still see this sort of thing happening? I understand that with pertussis and whooping cough, it derives from hesitancy from the moms from the usual DPT and other vaccines.
Well, Madam Chair, for now, currently, we are doing currently longitudinal study to determine the hesitancy of Filipinos in terms of our vaccination. And based on our study during the second quarter of 2023 and the fourth quarter of 2023, we now have around from 88% to 91% vaccine belief, or the confidence in vaccines are back.
Thank you. Did you sense that this disinformation was centralized or being controlled by a single force, or did it seem random?
For us, Madam Chair, honestly, we were not aware of this kind of issues. We thought it was just random.
Thank you very much, Yusek Verheere. That's very helpful that you, in fact, already realized that something was up with this information. Does Senator Padilla like to make a statement?
A'udhu billahi minasyaitanirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, ma'am. Isang
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Amin. Magandang umaga po sa lahat ng ating mga bisita. Isa pong napaka makasaysayang pagdinig, mahal na Senadora. Papakinggan ko po ang inyong pangbungad na salita. Ako po ay napakasarap pong madinig at magmumula po sa inyo. Kayo lamang po sa inyong English pa lamang ako po ay talagang pagkakabanggit nyo nung Cold War. Talagang yun po napakagandang ating namnamin sapagkat mula po sa inyong talumpati. Kaya po sana mamaya kung inyo pong mamarapatin, ay hihingi po ako ng maiksing suspension lang. Opo. Mamaya po, ma'am. Later. Maraming salamat po. Opo.
Maraming salamat at ganyan talaga yung seatmate ko. Okay, the next issue is whether the U.S. military was behind these posts and tweets discrediting Chinese vaccines and other medical equipment. Unfortunately, we cannot compel a branch of the department, a co-equal state, to testify before the committee. Nonetheless, it's very clear in the Pentagon statement in response to the expose by Reuters, and you will have that, I think, already displayed on screen, please, the Pentagon statement. And I think the DFA personnel who are here present will stand by me that, in fact, persons well versed in interpreting statements of other states, such as the DFA, all here, as well as the government lawyers who are always responding to similar news. Do you agree that the observation of the news outlets at the above statement is not in any way a denial? It does not deny the material assertions of the Reuters expose. In fact, there are those who would say that this is tantamount to an admission from the U.S. Department of Defense. Is there anyone who'd like to reply as to the nature of the Department of Defense statement? On its face, as we read it, by the grounds of international law. DFA legal, perhaps you can help us here. That they undertake a wide range of operations. Is that correct? Yes, I think that's clear. I mean, they assert that they use a variety of platforms, including social media, in order to counter malign influence against the United States. Certainly a right of every state to defend itself. Any thoughts? Yes, any lawyers from DFA or DND who are familiar with this sort of statement? It's certainly not a denial. Are we agreed? .
It's neither a confirmation, Madam Chair, nor a denial.
Yes, it's neither a confirmation or denial. However, we are also fully aware that if there are serious or unfounded allegations, for example, against the AFP, the DND will categorically deny the same. Isn't it so? Dito sa atin, kapag nagkaroon ng turuan na ganyang kalubha, ganyang kaseryoso, ganyang katindi, hindi ba talaga ay mag-uunahan pa tayo para i-deny? Kasi nakakasira naman ng ating institusyon, hindi po ba? Yes, Secretary Manalo, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Senator. Just to, on this particular statement, I think if we, judging and following from the final sentence, I think it's a declaration of perhaps a U.S. policy that they would be undertaking deterrence against any kind of malign influence against them.
Tama naman. Siyempre, pagtatanggol rin ang sarili
I
nila.
think yan ang ibig sabihin.
Oo naman. Tayo rin, di ba? Ganon
Same thing.
din naman.
Same.
Pag inakusahan ng mali, siyempre, itatanggi naman natin, ano? So, is it a reasonable assumption that the U.S. military did not deny what was written in the Reuters article? Because the same is true? Is that what we assume, since there is no vehement denial typical of the military institutions worldwide? Yes, Secretary Manalo, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can only repeat what Secretary Teodoro said. I think it's neither a denial or an assertion of.
Secretary Chodoro, you'd like to speak for yourself?
No, Mama, if it's neither a confirmation nor a denial, then the burden of proof is on the asserter to prove something. So that means to say that the US DOD will neither confirm nor deny. Somebody has evidence, come out and prove it. I think that's the import of the statement.
Yes, that's correct. Neither a confirmation or a denial. But why would you not deny something if it was not true?
I think, ma'am,
Surely
it's,
jump into the fray and knock them dead.
I really can't speak for them. I think that's long-term policy that they neither confirm nor deny several things.
I've read in the very recent past very vehement denials from the U.S. DND. They are certainly not hesitant about lambasting people who accuse them of what they believe are wrongful and inaccurate things.
As I said, ma'am, I can't really speak for them, Your Honor.
That's right. Neither can we, although, of course, some news outlets view the Pentagon statement not just merely a lack of denial, but an actual admission of the veracity of the Reuters, as it is the habit, indeed, of military institutions to deny immediately wrongful accusations. In our legal procedure, is it not that an assertion not denied is therefore deemed admitted?
It depends. If the assertion calls for a denial, the characterization that
This certainly calls for a denial because
Ma'am,
it
that-
has very, very serious ethical ramifications already mentioned by Dr. Lucy.
well, on probably they can invoke matters of national security on that matter, but it's in a legal proceeding that when an assertion calls for a denial, then it can be laid down in evidence that the non-denial, if the nature of the question would call in the normal course of things, if I remember my evidence right, and it is not denied, then it can be submitted in evidence that such was an implied admission
Yes,
in a legal proceeding.
I understand that a legal proceeding would be required, but it is, of course, even in a legal proceeding, even under the rules of Philippine evidence, clear that an assertion that is not denied will have to be deemed admitted. Certainly one such so important as this one. Any instinct from the AFP and the DND? Why was the U.S. DND so cagey with neither an admission nor a denial? Wouldn't you deny it immediately when someone accuses you of such an evil, wicked, dangerous, unethical campaign? Nakangiti kayo, kaya sasabihin ko na umuo na kayo. O
There,
siya.
ma'am, in ours, because we belong to a different set of rules, we will deny, naturally, any
Yes.
assertion that will affect the integrity of the institution, any false assertion, any malpropaganda, malign influence, we will immediately deny it. But that's us.
Perhaps all military institutions will be more or less similar. In any
Ma'am,
case,
Philippine soldiers do not lie.
there we go.
Look, ma'am, they're...
And all their wives will come forward to prove it.
Yes, ma'am, I can assure
Thank
you
you.
about that,
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Okay, so we next call upon Professor Jonathan Ong, who's very kindly online, who authored the article, The Contagion of Stigmatization, Racism and Discrimination in the Infodemic Moment. During the pandemic, were you able to see these controversial tweets and posts in social media which malign Chinese-made vaccines and protective equipment? Can you describe the posts and tweets that you mentioned? Dr. Ong, I see you.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me. Yes, this was a subject of a joint paper that myself and Dr. Gideon Lasco had authored for several portals, including the LSE blog. So these posts, we could only assume were misinformation. So ang assumption po namin ay ito ay mga sabi-sabi lang or haka-haka lang ng mga tao online. We did not know that some of these posts were actually intentionally misleading. And I think that's what is so alarming about the Reuters investigation. They gave very specific examples of the posts and memes that contained hashtags that were directly aligned and directed by the US military. And ang strategy po dito ay to prey on existing anti-China sentiments. So preying on stereotypes that people might have about certain goods or items that are defective. So ito po ay ginagamit and wini-weaponize to stoke public's existing fears and anxieties at a time of incredible tragedy, and people were very afraid. So ito po ginamit, and that's what the Reuters investigation was asserting. To actually weaponize people's existing fears and anxieties. And this is very effective in getting people in a very fearful and panicked state. And once you're in that kind of state, you're more manipulable and prone to believing certain kinds of information. And that is why this needs further probing and investigation. And I think the Reuters report was very shocking, not only in giving very specific examples of these posts, but also telling us na nagkaroon ng conflict behind the scenes within the US military and the State Department between people who were justifying the campaign and people who were actually against the use of the campaign. And that's what we need to further investigate.
Thank you very much, Professor Ong. Magkapareho kayo ng DOH. Nakikita ninyo yung tweets and yung posts, pero hindi ninyo alam kung saan galing. Hindi rin ninyo alam kung may talagang nagmamaniobra na, kumbaga, centralized. But I would like to ask, what do you suspect was the objective of these posts?
So, so it's interesting that it's not just the Philippines that was the target country. It was several countries in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. So these are regions in which the US has very clear geopolitical interests, and they want to consolidate support within these countries, while China is obviously trying to win over public sentiment here using vaccine diplomacy. And I think that's what the Reuters investigation was trying to uncover and go into great detail, di ba? Na parang tinatry i-counter
Dr.
itong
Ong,
vaccine.
Professor Ong, sorry.
Opo.
Naniniwala kayo na may disinformation campaign that was managed and concerted by groups interested in the U.S. policy in these very controverted regions?
So I will base it po on the Reuters report, and if you allow me to explain a little further. So the Reuters report was very detailed in identifying people they had interviewed, U.S. Based diplomats and also former military officials who were very critical of the campaign. And I think that's yung power ng story in the Reuters report is they based it off people's testimonies and anonymous testimonies saying that they had actually objected to employing this disinformation campaign in these countries na may military interests ang United States. And so they were able
Yes,
to piece
Professor,
together
I am also
the
fully
leadership
aware.
and the accounts.
Oh, sorry. Professor, yes, I know many American citizens as well as government officials who are horrified by the notion that such a campaign was undertaken by the Pentagon. So you feel somehow that this is real, even if you did not observe any systematic proliferation of disinformation.
So I did not have access to that level of data. To be able to access this kind of information, kailangan natin ng verification from social media platforms themselves. And I think that's what the Reuters reporters did. Once they identified the 300 accounts that were guilty of engineering that hashtag, they consulted Twitter, now called X, whether indeed their suspicions were correct, and they verified that. They actually verified that and took down those accounts. But if I may add, Madam Chair, I have additional questions about this kind of reporting. And if I may ask those questions for you to further probe through your office.
Yes, I'm happy to hear them now, or you can submit them confidentially if you don't want to reveal them at this point.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some of these questions now.
Yes, if you can do it very quickly, we have
Okay.
quite a long way to go.
Sige po. Unang-una, what is striking to me as a disinformation researcher who is very knowledgeable about the kinds of disinformation campaigns, how they are organized behind the scenes, and the quality and the tone in which they are expressed online. It's interesting na yung examples that they gave ng Reuters is translated in the local languages. So, designed siya in Washington, D.C. by the U.S. military, but they are translated in Filipino. But they're also translated around into different countries and made to spread across the countries. We need to ask, therefore, are there possibility of subcontractors that the U.S. military enlisted? And who might those subcontractors be? And where are they located? It is interesting that those posts convey insider jokes, cultural knowledge of what would resonate with local citizens and communities in the Philippines, but also in other countries like Turkmenistan, I think, was one of the other examples. So it's important for us to track down potential in-country collaborators responsible for the translation and dissemination of the campaigns, for us to hold these people into account. Number two would be the activity of social media platforms themselves. If you read very closely the Reuters investigation, it was very interesting that Reuters reported how social media platforms called the U.S. military for a meeting, for a Zoom meeting, to say that they were able to identify these accounts that the U.S. military were using and operating from their base. But did these social media platforms, particularly Facebook, which was identified in the Reuters report, did they communicate this to the Philippines office of Facebook? Did they communicate this to any Philippines government official who they should also be held into account for? So these social media platforms are obviously, their headquarters are in the United States, but they must be
That's correct.
accountable
yes.
to us as well. So I
Yes.
think those are two
They
important
haven't
questions.
even turned up this morning, Professor On.
Yeah, and I think those are important questions that an independent body of researchers should be able to get access to, and I think your office should feel empowered to commission an independent, deep investigation here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ong. That's very helpful, and those are certainly leads that we need to follow up on. Meanwhile, we go back to the DOH and Vince Dizon, and admitted by us all here. During the first 6 months, there was a very low vaccination rate until the very end of 2021, and the rate at that point was 25%, and we know that President Duterte was irate that he couldn't push it forward, threatening, in fact, imprisonment at one point for those who refused to be vaccinated. To your mind, what were the main reasons, even among very vulnerable sectors manifesting grave comorbidities? Do you manage, in hindsight, to explain why the low hesitancy, despite the fact that people were falling ill and many of us lost relatives in the pandemic? Yes, you're recognized, Vince.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think just to put things in perspective, there were really two main and very serious challenges during the beginning of the vaccination program, which was sometime in the late part of 2020, leading towards 2021. The first one was really the lack of supply. It was very difficult to get supply of any vaccine. No?
Yes, so part of it was a supply issue.
It was a supply
Yes,
issue.
yes,
But
we're all aware of that. Yeah.
coupled with that was really what Yusek Rosette mentioned, which was really a very strong hesitancy issue on the part of the public. As the surveys at that time showed, it was as low as 25% to begin with, meaning only about 25 to 30% were actually willing to take a COVID vaccine. Right. In order to address this, I think upon directions of the president himself at that time, there was really a very, very strong multi-sectoral effort, which included the government agencies as well as the private sector. Sure. In fact, I recall there was a very strong campaign to combat that. And
That's
this was
correct.
really also borne out by a lot of
And we
disinformation.
continue to be grateful for the participation of the private sector, the SM Group, San Miguel
Yes.
Group, the Razon Group, who all bolted in and showed their civic-mindedness, offering for free so many vaccines. The LGUs were also at the forefront. My question is, during that period of great vaccine hesitancy and intermittent supply, during that more or less 6-month plus period, how many probably died or contracted severe COVID? Do you have any data at all?
Madam Chair, during that time, we started off with, during the second quarter of 2020, that would be
Come again?
during the second quarter of the year 2020,
Okay.
when the COVID started, we had a total of 33,991 illnesses and 1,936 deaths. At the end of the year 2020, we had a total of 158,404 illnesses and 3,678 deaths.
Okay, this is still
Yes.
2020.
Yes,
Paano yung
madam.
2021? Up to the second quarter, sabihin natin.
Yes, Madam Chair. During 2021, second quarter of 2021, we had a total of 646,760 illnesses and 12,689 deaths.
So it climbed radically.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Tapos, nung katapusan ng 2021, kung kailan talagang nagsimula yung marami na nagpapabakuna, ilan ang nagkasakit at ilan ang namatay?
During the fourth quarter of 2021, only for the fourth quarter, we
Yes.
had a total of two,
Oh, this is not cumulative.
not cumulative, Madam Chair.
Can we have cumulative?
Okay.
Perhaps if not today, then you can submit it.
Yes,
I'd
Madam
be
Chair, we will
grateful.
provide
Sige,
that.
sa last quarter lang po.
Sa last quarter lang po ng 2021, we had a total of 298,452 illnesses and 7,878 deaths.
Nung yung third quarter, para maidagdag na lang natin lahat. Yung
Yes
third
po.
quarter po.
Third quarter of 2021, we had a total of 1,117,896 illnesses. Just wanted to emphasize, Madam Chair, that during this third quarter, we had the Delta variant.
Yep.
And then the deaths during that time, the third quarter of 2021, was at 21,424.
So, these are shocking numbers. The mortality and morbidity rates are terrible. And this is the period that we refer to and that the Reuters article refers to. Yes, Mr. Vince Dizon, you're
I just
raising your
want
hand.
to just very quickly just highlight that very important data point that Yusek Rosette made. I think the 6-month period you're mentioning is really a period between the first quarter of 2020, around February, and towards the third
Pero wala
quarter,
pang
2021, sorry.
Kailan ba nag-umpisa yung bakuna?
2021 po, March 1.
Kaya nga, so,
So-
yung first quarter hindi talaga kasali, second quarter lang
Opo,
pinag-uusapan.
but I think the importance of the first quarter is that this was during the time when the outbreak of the Delta variant started in India, if I'm not mistaken, and it would eventually and inevitably lead
Parang
to
yung Delta was much later in the year.
hindi pa ano po 'yan, middle of 2021. Mga ganun po.
Third quarter.
Opo, mga ganun po. So I think the critical timeline that you mentioned, it's made even more critical because of the Delta variant. Kasi yun po talaga yung I think considered the most deadly.
Okay.
That's why we needed to really vaccinate as many and as fast during this period. But unfortunately, because of hesitancy and as shown today, the disinformation that came in during that time,
So you
it
do
made it
think that
doubly.
so you do think the information had its malign effects?
Oh,
and,
definitely, ma'am.
Truly worked against the Filipino people. The numbers are shocking. We're talking about millions, hundreds of thousands. This is no meager number. This is
No.
much worse than the body count and casualties of war.
Yes, ma'am. That's why I think the president really at that time really expressed a lot of frustration because he knew that it would lead to illnesses and sadly death.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dizon. Yusek, one last question. As a doctor, is this the last question? As a doctor po, is there any valid reason at all why people should be dissuaded from receiving Sinovac shots? I know it's a mere 50+% efficacy, but it's at that time was better than nothing, right?
Madam Chair, first, based on studies, Sinovac prevented 51% of symptoms if you are to receive that, but 100% protection from death and from severe disease of COVID-19. And as a doctor, based on the evidence at hand, wherein the Food and Drug Administration of the Philippines has given its emergency use authority based on safety and efficacy, and also the WHO emergency use listing, Sinovac was included, and based on our experts' recommendations, I will not have that kind of issues regarding this vaccine and will not dissuade people to receive the vaccine.
Thank you very much, Yusek. So we have that on record that there's really no medical reason to object to Sinovac or even the other Chinese vaccines. Kaya lang, kailan ba dumating yung iba, yung iba't ibang Western vaccines, ika nga?
Yes, Madam Chair. During the first quarter also of 2021, after the donation from the Chinese government of Sinovac in the last week of February 2021, AstraZeneca vaccines came, and these were donations coming from the COVAX facility. A total of around 500,000 came.
So that was first quarter of 2021?
Yes, that was first week of March of 2021 where AstraZeneca came. And then the other Western vaccines came around May already, Madam Chair, but only in trickles.
Thank you very much, Yusek. Thank you very much, DOH. Punta muna tayo sa DFA. Having heard the doctors as well as the other specialists, can we ask from the DFA once again that if indeed the U.S. military orchestrated an anti-vax misinformation campaign in the Philippines, did they violate local or international law? Does this action contravene the principle of non-intervention in the International Court of Justice? And even, as some scholars and the New Zealand experts say, that this information, which affects public health efforts during a pandemic, is a possible violation of international law with grave consequences. Yes, Secretary Manalo or anyone from the DFA, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On that particular question, I don't think I can really give an answer on whether it did violate international law. I suppose.
Well, if we assume
Yeah.
that what was written is in fact accurate, can we say that this violates local or international law? Or are we going to say that this is par for the course and accept that this information that causes hundreds of thousands of deaths is acceptable international norm?
Well, Madam Chair, I think we would have to really investigate the
No,
whole
just
issue.
as a matter of law, if this was in fact true, I'm not trying to catch you. If this was in fact true that this information campaign of this magnitude, of this severity was undertaken, wouldn't it violate local and international law? Well,
What?
Dr. Lucy already said that this was clearly unethical if it were true.
Perhaps, Madam Chair, I could pass the floor to our legal advisor because I think this is more of an international legal issue. I have our Assistant Secretary for International.
Yes, po. Asek Tejada, is that it?
Tejada.
Yes, po.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Locally, it could, any disinformation
Yes,
campaign.
can we speak closer to the mic, please?
Locally, any international, any campaign to discredit,
Oo.
especially an information that concerns health issue is a matter of national security, of course. Therefore, any country could take issue on this. But
I'm sorry, national security. We're talking about public health.
yes, yes, it is a national security issue.
Yes, I understand, but graver than that, of course, it causes
Yes, yes.
so many, there's widespread death and disease, right?
Indeed, indeed, Madam Chair. Therefore, any attempt to discredit or to sow disinformation in, for example, in the Philippines,
Sure.
our national authorities are for sure can take issue on that and can take action.
What action, what legal recourse would we have in the international arena?
You could go either to counter the disinformation as what the health department
No,
has
no,
said.
but that's not an international arena. What legal recourse does the Philippines have? Has the Philippines have? Anong
Or-
anong magagawa natin? Kasi, nangyari na nga to.
Okay.
Paano natin gagawa ng paraan na hindi na mauulit?
Opo. If we are able to identify po kung sino po yung nagkakalat ng maling information, we could go
Yes,
the
but what's
diplomatic
the legal
way.
recourse? What are our remedies? Saan tayo pupunta?
Well, Madam Chair,
Ang hirap naman na sasabihin sa mga pamilya na nawalan ng mga mahal sa buhay, na wala na tayong magawa, iyakan na lang natin.
hindi naman po ganun, Madam Chair.
Eh, kaya
I
nga,
think
ano po ang sinasabi mo?
We should vigorously inform the public about any disinformation that is being made
Hindi, pero
by
wala
any
ba tayong
entity.
legal recourse dyan? Wala bang mapapataw na kaso ang Pilipinas na hindi naman tama ang ginawa nila?
This needs further study, Madam Chair. Of course, using
We do have legal remedies, don't we?
for sure, Madam Chair, but it is only
Assuming that
now.
this was true. I am not accusing anyone at this juncture, but certainly what we have heard is very substantial and very, very
Madam Chair,
serious.
thank you very much. If we knew what we know now, that this is a campaign,
Well, we do know what we know now.
this report by the Reuters, that there is actually
Kaya nga, anong magagawa?
maari po tayong gumawa po ng reply that
Hindi, ang
this is
galing-galing
not,
natin gumawa ng note verbal. Hindi ba dapat mag-note verbal?
Opo. Note verbal is one way. That is the
Daan-daan
diplomatic
na ang
route.
ginagawa
but,
ng DFA, di ba? Hindi ba dapat iprotesta to?
Opo.
Hindi ba dapat mag-statement man lang yung DFA o DND? Hindi ba dapat magsalita ang pamahalaan natin na umalma? Bakit ito ginawa? Bakit biniktima ang libo-libong Pilipino?
Madam Chair,
Wala
if I
tayong
may-
palag eh.
If I may.
Hindi tayo umimik eh. Kiming-kimi tayo eh. Okay lang na pinatayan napakaraming Pilipino kung sakaling tama ito. Narinig natin ng mga doktor galing sa Amerika, doktor ng DOH, mga sikat tanyag, mga expert sa kanilang larangan. Bakit hindi tayo nakikinig?
Madam Chair, I believe that our country has also made representations sa ating mga
Wala pa akong
sa ibang bansa.
narinig. Asan po yung
And we-
representation? Pahingi ng kopya, please.
And we could also go.
Yes,
because-
is that correct,
but-
Secretary Manalo? ASEC Tejada asserts that we have made representation,
Madam
whatever
Chair,
that means, in protest to these actions. Napakarami nating note verbal. Hindi ba dapat isulat man lang na hindi tama itong mga pangyayaring to?
Well, Madam Chair, the first time the DFA became aware of the situation was when the Reuters article came
Oo,
out.
sabay-sabay naman
Oo.
tayo. Pero mula noon, what has been done? I believe it's June 12, June 14, ano? Nasa 25 na po tayo. Have we taken any action, considered perhaps drafting something, somehow taking the cudgels for all those who died?
We have, in fact, when we heard of this article, we immediately thought of seeking information from the United States kasi doon lang namin nalaman to after we
So,
read the article.
have we received any response?
Could I ask our Assistant Secretary, American
Yes, please.
Affairs, because we did want to seek clarification on what exactly was this issue that we read about.
Please.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, and Senator Padilla. Yes, as the Secretary said, Madam Chair, immediately after the Reuters article came out, obviously we couldn't, do any official action yet on the basis of an article. So in response to your question about the note verbal,
But the simple
definitely we
query-
reached out. Yes, we reached out immediately to the U.S. Embassy and to
In what form?
U.S. authorities through our regular consultations
Okay.
mechanism.
Has there been any
The-
reply forthcoming?
The initial response po was we were referred to the Department of Defense, and so we also got a copy of the statement that you had read into the
Yes,
record
there's a
this
defense
morning.
attaché, we all know him.
Apo.
Anong sagot?
Essentially, they are looking into the matter, and we have not received any official and formal response yet in terms of any confirmation, denial, or anything. So we are waiting on that. We continue to monitor and to ask for information.
Yes, but moving forward, we are all in agreement that some action needs to be taken, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. In fact, we have initiated the
So we're
the
counting
regular.
on both the DFA and now the DND, as mentioned by ASEC Chan Gonzaga, to help us get to the bottom of this, and if we have legal remedies, undertake them as
Yes,
quickly as
ma'am.
possible.
Basically, the DFA and our embassy in Washington, not the Department of National Defense here
Yes,
in
Secretary
the Philippines. po.
Diodoro.
It's the U.S. DOD that ASEC Chan Gonzaga was referring to, not the Department of National Defense of the Philippines. That's why
I thought he was referring to you, given that you're the counterpart.
No, Your Honor. He was referring to, that's a diplomatic matter, even though involving a counterpart.
Even though it involves the counterpart
Yes,
department?
and that's probably
You're
more
certain of
proper.
that?
Yes, Your Honor. I am very certain. That's more properly within the purview of our diplomatic representation to the United States
Yes,
and the DFA.
Probably, but if you could help us along, because we would like to get to the bottom of this. Certainly your
If
counterparts
the
would have
DFA
better
requests us,
information.
Your Honor, we will certainly do.
DFA, please find it in your heart to request the Department of Defense. I don't know why we've suddenly become so officious, but let's do that. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we will, of course, first wait for the reply from the DOD, the U.S. Department of Defense, and obviously if there's anything in their reply which would prompt us to seek the assistance of our counterparts.
Magtulungan naman tayo. Ang dami-daming nagkasakit ng malala, ang dami-daming Pilipino na namatay dahil dito. Hindi natin alam kung direktang ito, pero sa numero na lang makikita natin na talagang nakakasindak ang epekto nito. Kaya't siguro naman, all hands on deck naman tayo nito. Importante naman na matapos itong usaping ito. Ano? At kung kinakailangan, alamin natin kung may sala talaga at patawan ng karampatan parusa. Eto ngayon, which brings us, since DND got back into the fray. Let us move on to a related matter, which was a report last year that the United States finally decided to release vaccines which the Philippines already paid for, only after President Duterte rescinded his decision to abrogate the VFA. So we're back to DND territory. Ambassador Romualdez, I believe you've been waiting, but you're muted. Babes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Romualdez. You were quoted as saying, then President Duterte, we need to give this VFA a chance because it will help us get our vaccines to our people. Does this mean that what ensued was a quid pro quo arrangement between the US and the Philippines? May kaliwaan bang nangyaring ganito? The vaccine, nabayad na natin, would only be delivered if the VFA remained untouched. It's a quote from your interview.
No, what I meant there was when what we had paid for was the Moderna, but the United States at that time was prepared to donate several vaccines or a number of vaccines to the Philippines and to other countries as well. But obviously, the priorities were the allies. We were an ally, but let's be very honest about it. The fact that there was there's no such thing as a free lunch, and the VFA was being dangled as by then President Duterte, that he was not sure he wanted to continue with it. He abrogated it at that time. So I pleaded with the president and told him that perhaps it would be best if we could just allow the VFA to continue, so that it will be much easier for us to be able to get the United States to give us the vaccines that we paid for, at the same time also get more vaccines down the road.
Yes, do you know a certain Haydarian? I think he was the one who interviewed you, and he said that you said, except Washington was holding back all their vaccines because President Biden back then wanted all Americans to get it first. But we had already paid for our Moderna vaccines. And to put it frankly, I basically begged the White House to give us the vaccines, to give people hope.
Well, like I said, there was already the executive order from the White House that President Biden said that all Americans will first get the vaccines before we start getting the vaccines out.
But why was there a need for the good ambassador to beg the White House for the delivery of Moderna vaccines when we'd already paid for them?
But even if we had paid for them, the schedule was actually still much later on. What I did was to ask the White House if they could give us the vaccines earlier than that.
Did they come earlier? In fact, as I recall, they were quite seriously delayed.
It was the delay, but there was other vaccines that are actually given priority for the Philippines, and specifically that was Pfizer.
So why was Pfizer, which we did not pay for, in the Philippines before Moderna, which we had paid for? I'm lost.
Yeah, Pfizer had more
supply.
Vaccine, more supply, and they had it with the COVAX facility, which I'm sure our DOH is familiar with. That we were given, the donation came from the.
And what did the VFA? What did the mention of the VFA have to do with it?
Well, like I said, in diplomacy, as far as I'm concerned, I felt that if we had the VFA in place, which was in place at that time, we just had to continue with it. So it'll be much easier for us to be able to really ask our friends here in the United States. It will be perhaps more conducive for them to be able to give us the vaccines.
Is it correct then, Ambassador Romualdez, to say that aside from paying the purchase price, the Philippines also had to beg and promise to allow U.S. troops in the country before U.S. vaccines were released? This is the impression that your interview gives.
Well, what was meant there was the vaccines that were being donated is what we were after. The vaccines that we had paid for, Moderna had already made it clear that the vaccines will be coming at a certain time frame. and it was, well, as you said, it was delayed.
So, what connection did the VFA and the Moderna vaccines have, in your mind?
Well, there was no connection in that one. The connection was more on the donation, on having more of the vaccines available for us. And specifically, that was Pfizer.
So you're saying that the VFA was related to the donation of Pfizer and had nothing to do with the already paid supply of Moderna?
No, it did not have anything to do with that one. It was more on the donations that were made available to countries all over the
But
world.
we paid for the Moderna. It's not a donation. Why did we have
Yes.
to agree to the VFA if we had already
Well,
paid for the medicine?
We did not agree to the VFA because of Moderna. We allowed the president had approved the VFA to continue because I told him that perhaps it would be much easier for us to get more of the Pfizer vaccines that were part of the COVAX
I see.
facility.
I see. Did anything or anyone in Washington imply that the VFA had something to do with the provision of U.S.-made vaccines to the Philippines? Where did you get the notion that they were perhaps tied together and that they would be friendlier and more ready to provide the Western vaccines if the VFA remained in place?
Well, I could see that the priorities were given to countries that had obviously good relations with the United States. I mean, it's a very simple deduction, really, when you see that there are other countries that were given priority. And I wanted to be part of that priority at that time.
Yes, but you already said that Pfizer, being so widely available and being supplied much more efficiently, was all over the world. Are you saying that all over the world, every country with Pfizer was also required to host U.S. soldiers?
No. This was the earlier part when we were asking for the Pfizer, because at that time there was limited numbers, as you specifically said. President Biden said the priority will be first for Americans to receive the vaccines before they start exporting it. However, they also had donations that were being given. The United States government was donating vaccines to the USAID and other facilities, and also to the COVAX facility. And I wanted to be part of that priority.
And the priorities involved countries that hosted U.S. forces?
Not necessarily. I was just simply using that as a way of telling them that, look, we're going to continue with this. I hope that you'll give us, since we have and since 1951, we've had a mutual defense treaty. We've had the visiting forces agreement, which I'm sure President Duterte will perhaps continue with it. So these are the things that I used as a reason why we should be given priority like other countries close to the United States.
So it was just a usual inducement. Is that what you're saying?
Well, perhaps.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Romualdez, and of course to those in the United States online, most of all Dr. Lucy, as well as Professor Ong. Ambassador Romualdez, thank you very much. We're very grateful for your participation and your help in getting to the bottom of this report, and you are excused. Thank you very much. At this point, may I ask Mr. Attorney Talamayan of CICC regarding the Chinese cyber psyops here in the Philippines. Parang pinaglalaroan tayo ng lahat ng bansa. Up to this point, we are merely talking about American psyops. It is equally noteworthy, however, that the other player in the great power competition, China, has also been orchestrating or alleged to have been orchestrating illegal cyber operations in disinformation campaign. And that cyber attacks and hacking have been reported since January by DICT, clearly tracing the IP addresses to China. So DICT, Cybercrime Unit, would you like to comment on these reported hacking and attack incidents? I believe it's Attorney Talamayan po.
Good morning, Mr.
I see also that Attorney Lotok of NBI, are you with cybercrime? Are you with the cybercrime division? Maybe you'd like to add something after Attorney Talamayan. Oh, great. So, Attorney Talamayan, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the part of the CICC in monitoring the smear campaign by the Chinese government, Your Honor, we have been doing some analysis, and until now, Your Honor, because some of the IP address that has been mentioned in previous report of the CICC is located somewhere in China, and we cannot discount that this is just it was the Chinese government did it. At the moment, Your Honor,
So any other proof or evidence, or are there any other signs that these attacks were in fact state-sponsored, or at least state-sanctioned by the People's Republic?
we cannot say that, Your Honor, because the using VPN, Your Honor, the
Sorry.
virtual network.
Yes.
It goes to some countries, and some of the research by the CICC owner, there are some countries that this smear campaign that was posted online is located somewhere in China, some is in other countries, Your Honor, because they're using VPN, so we cannot locate it, Your Honor.
Right, but aside from the IP addresses, any other trademarks, any other hallmarks of Chinese origin?
Your Honor,
Kasi nga iniikot-ikot. Pero maliban doon, wala nang ibang indikasyon?
there's no big indication, Your Honor, that the Chinese government is doing it, Your Honor.
Oh, okay,
but,
because that's the impression that your report, or at least the report of the cyber agencies released in February, parang ganon ang sinasabi.
Yes, Your Honor. The record that was released in February, Your Honor, it all goes to the Chinese government, Your Honor. That the Chinese has to do with it, all the campaign that going online, Your Honor. But until now, Your Honor, we cannot pin the ICC is still doing the deep research because of the tools that we have, Your Honor, is not that high tech that we can pinpoint all throughout to the Chinese government, Your Honor. Only the analysis, Your Honor.
Okay, so after the February attack with the IP addresses suspiciously deriving from China, meron na naman kayong report noong 27 April, hindi ko alam kung DICT o nanggaling sa CICC o galing sa NBI, na nagsabi, recent massive spike in cyber misinformation against the Philippines from a website called Dark Reading. May alam po kayo tungkol dito? Kasi lumabas to sa dyaryo. Yes, please. DICT Director Reyes po.
Yes, ma'am.
Kayo yung nag-release nito, yung tungkol sa dark reading?
Hindi po, though we have also monitored some spikes relative to that one. So similarly, ma'am, we are working with the Cybercrime Investigation Coordination Center. So we trace most of the IP addresses that emanates from China as well.
Okay, is it true that cyber espionage activities in the Philippines have increased fourfold in the first quarter of 2024?
Actually, ma'am, we could not classify it if it's espionage. We are trying to look into breaches and incidents. And
Yes,
we
but
have
at
been
least in terms of the hacking, in terms of the attacks on government sites.
yes, ma'am. We have
Is
been
it true that there's been a fourfold increase in said activity, in many cases using IP address that come from China, or having other proof that they derive from that country?
Yes, ma'am. For having it classified with as espionage, we have been reporting the incidents on a monthly basis through the National Cyber
pero
Interagency
tama na
Committee.
talagang times 4 na yung dagdag? Ganun ba kadami?
Yes, ma'am. Meron pong ganung spikes
Ganun
po.
talaga kadami?
Yes, ma'am.
Pero ang sinasabi niyong spike, ibig sabihin, babagsak ulit? Tapos tataas ulit?
Yes,
Ganun ba
ma'am.
yun?
There were instances, ma'am, when we have some incidents within the West Philippine Sea, medyo may spikes. After that one,
At
bababa.
tuwing may insidente sa West Philippine Sea, ganun?
Meron pong ganung trend, ma'am.
Yes, ang sabi, last year, this is going back a little bit, even if it's not cyber espionage, may sinasabi na yung Chinese hackers launched malware attacks on critical infrastructure bases in Guam. Is there any possibility or suspicion of that happening in the Philippines, given the rising tensions in the West Philippine Sea? This is an attack on the infrastructure bases in Guam. Yung malware na narinig natin?
We have been monitoring some malwares, ma'am,
Yes, that's
specifically
right.
with our
That's
government
why I'm
agencies.
asking. Is there any malware attack against our critical infrastructure similar to Guam's?
We have experienced, ma'am, so many. In fact, we have
So many?
we have been experiencing many, ma'am, malware attacks. Although we have been preventing it. The reason for that, ma'am, we have already a connection with our government agencies. We have a National Security Operations Center, wherein 28 government agencies are connected to us, and we have been monitoring them 24/7, ma'am.
So what's
we have
being done to secure the country's critical infrastructure from malware and other digital attacks?
Yes, ma'am. We are recommending most, if not all, government agencies to connect to our National Security Operations Center to be monitored 24/7. If we have monitored such, we'll be informing them on such and we'll be investigating deeply.
So are the key agencies, for example, CAAP and so on, are our airports, our seaports, are they all part and parcel of your national security
The
operation?
CAAP, ma'am, I think is already connected to our National Security Operations Center as well.
PPA?
We'll give you, ma'am, the listings. We have 28 of them, ma'am, later, ma'am.
Have you actually caught any Chinese or other hacker group in the past 12 months or so? May nahuhuli ba tayo? Kasi mayat maya may report tungkol dito. Eh baka wala naman nahuhuli kahit kailan. Nakakaya naman tayo.
Yes, ma'am. The prosecution investigation, we pass it to the CICC, the National Bureau of Investigation, PNP, ma'am.
Ang galing mo magpasa, Director Reyes. Attorney Talamaya,
Actually, ma'am,
yung
it's not on
CICC,
purview.
meron ba kayong nahuhuli? O
Yo-
di kaya nahabla?
Your Honor,
Nakukulong?
the CICC don't have any power regarding the law enforcement, Your Honor.
Chair, may I? The latest PAOK operations that resulted in the takeover of illegal cyber hubs in Bambantarlac and in Porac, Pampanga, have resulted in a treasure trove of figurative treasure trove of a lot of capabilities which are under the process of analysis.
So this has to do with cybersecurity or simply with POGO?
It has,
treasure
we
trove?
are not assuming that, actually, ma'am, we hesitate to classify this as a POGO. Because this is not a POGO. They were involved in human trafficking.
But isn't that the very nature of POGO, that
No, ma'am,
criminal syndicates undertake international crime?
Actually, ma'am, I'd like to differentiate, if I can take the opportunity. POGOs are business process outsourcing that do not take bets anyway. But I think what happened was during the ban on gambling in China, they transferred operations
There's
here.
always been a ban in China.
Right. And when Macau was closed, they transferred here, and all sorts of things happened. Now, suffice it to state, ma'am, that I think
Anong pinagkaiba sa POGO?
No, a POGO is a pure business process outsourcing. For
Okay.
example, ma'am, off-track betting.
Anong suspicion ninyo dun sa Bamban at sa Porac?
Ay, hindi po, love scam na ho, scamming na eh.
Pero yung love scam, usong-uso yan sa NBI. Noon pa yan sina Vic Lorenzo, parating rin report yan.
No, love scam and other forms of illegal activities. And I really don't know if bet taking or gaming was
So hindi
included.
na siya POGO kasi hindi na
ma'am.
siya bet taking.
Hindi na, ma'am. And the equipment gathered is still in the process of being.
So it's a cybercrime hub.
Yes, ma'am.
Kung ano-anong scam na yan.
Definitely a
So,
cybercrime hub.
There are no actual gambling machines, is that what you're saying?
No, ma'am. It's all electronic and
No, but
text
most
blast
gambling
machine.
setups now are electronic.
I'm not too sure, ma'am. I'm not too sure about that. It's with the PAOK now, but I think I have information that all agencies are cooperating and analyzing this as to see what kind of activities these people were involved in.
So yung nahuhuli natin, hindi pa natin nahuhuli sa cyber talaga. Nahuhuli talaga sa physical
Sa law enforcement operations,
and
ma'am.
law enforcement operations.
Yung cyber, ma'am,
Yung
is
sa
more
cyber, wala pa tayo
preventative.
nahuhuli sa dinami-daming report.
Preventative, ma'am. At least walang breach, walang DNS, walang denial of service na nangyayari. So, I mean, in that sense, parang bangko po, hindi nasasara yung ATM. Bagamat may reported na mga breaches, na ipapara
Pero hindi
naman.
tumitigil. Kasi nag-times
Hindi po
4
talaga
na nga.
titigil yun, ma'am. Hindi
Pero
titigil.
nababawasan kapag takedown ka ng takedown.
Depende po sa sitwasyon. Katulad din naman po ng mga kumpanya, hindi po tumitigil talaga. Lumalaki lang ng lumalaki. Kasi po, pagkakakitaan nga, pwede
Oo nga.
pong ransomware. Kahit
Pero
po
yung tanong, lumalaki ng lumalaki, tayo ba lumalakas ng lumalakas ang kapabilidad na labanan
well,
itong mga ito?
lumalakas po ang hindi lang po labanan, kung hindi po protektahan muna. Sa IT po natin, pinoprotektahan po natin ang information systems natin sa mga breach. Doon naman po sa remediation sa cyber, iba naman po sa DND, ibang usapan po yun, ay iba naman po ang role, no? Pero the important thing is
I think there's a crossover because of the great fear of cyber terrorism
Yes,
with the
ma'am.
malware attacking critical infrastructure. I think that's actually the great concern, at least in this committee.
Agreed. So, ma'am, there are two approaches here. I think the DICT will agree. Number one is there's a great campaign to improve our cyber hygiene, which is the weakest link of any any information technology system. For example, like a credit card scam. If you answer a phishing email, you're done for. No matter how robust your infrastructure is,
Pasok na.
the weakest link is the user.
Of course.
So, cyber hygiene, and secondly, is the resilience and redundancy of the systems. But there is a coordination mechanism, but in certain systems, we need to have some siloing.
So, ang totoo, we have a long way to go.
Because it costs a lot of money, actually.
That's correct. It's all engineering.
Yes, ma'am. And
you.
cash.
Thank you. I think we've now completed the hearing, at least for this disinformation of the Pentagon. I will call for a 5-minute suspension. I think we've more or less covered all the issues. I call for a 5-minute suspension, and perhaps we can release the DOH at this juncture. Thank you very kindly for your active participation and the valuable information you've shared from the medical profession as well as from the area of public health. I will call for a 5-minute suspension, therefore, but the rest need to stay for the next item on the agenda, and this has to do with the Ayungin Shoal incident of June. So 5 minutes po, and we'll see each other shortly. recognizes, acknowledges the arrival of our minority Senator Risa Ontiveros. Robin is still with us, Senator Padilla, and they are all aware of the agenda for the second half of this hearing, and that is a resolution for an inquiry into the Ayungin Shoal incident that took place 17 June, resulting in injury to a Philippine Navy personnel. So we have the narration that on 17 June, 6 Philippine vessels took part in an attempted resupply operation. None were able to reach the second Thomas Shoal, where a unit of Philippine Marines is stationed aboard the BRP Sierra Madre, a grounded warship. Since the Chinese Coast Guard intercepted and targeted all the mission vessels, including the rigid-hulled inflatable boats, puncturing them using machetes, knives, and pikes, rendering them immobile. The Chinese forces also confiscated 8 weapons from the Filipino troops after boarding one of the RHIBs and destroyed the boat's communications and navigational equipment, as well as the personal mobile phones of the Filipino personnel. Okay, so we specifically urge that the AFP personnel present at the Ayungin Shoal during the incident should be present this morning, and we have asked Seaman First Class Underwater Operator Jeffrey Facundo. Are you present? Andiyan ka, no? Kanina pa. Okay. Kita ka sa mic.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, maraming salamat. Anong pangalan mo? Rank, unit?
Seaman First Class Underwater Operator, Jeffrey, ma'am. S. Facundo.
Okay. Maraming salamat at kinikilala namin ang inyong tapang at galang. At nagpapasalamat sa serbisyo mo para sa ating bansa, sakripisyo at hirap. Ikaw yung nasaktan nung insidente ng ika-17 ng Hunyo doon sa Ayungin Shoal, tama ba?
Yes, ma'am. Doon mismo sa may Sierra Madre, ma'am.
Ano nangyari? Bakit ka nadali? Bakit naputol yung daliri mo? Ano yung sinasakyan ninyo? Anong sasakyan yon?
Isalaysay ko na lang, ma'am, yung...
Yes, pakisalaysay lang. Alam na naman lahat at napanood na rin yung video para lang maliwanag sa lahat ang mga pangyayari.
Actually, ma'am, nung 17 ng umaga po, nagsimula kami sa Rizal, ma'am. Palawan. Then, binaybay namin po yung Rizal, Palawan to Ayungin Shoal, ma'am. Around...
Ilang barko yon? 6 ang nakalista dun sa dyaryo. Hindi ko alam kung totoo.
Nung umalis kami sa Rizal, Palawan po, ma'am, 4 na rib po, ma'am. 2 sa Marines, then 2 rin sa Nabsug, ma'am.
4 kayo nung umalis?
Yes po, ma'am.
Ilan yung Marine?
2 rib po ng Marines, ma'am. Then 2 rin po sa Nabsug.
Okay.
Then, ma'am, yung ruta ng kabila, ma'am, sa Marines, iwalay. Sa may Sabina Shoal sila, ma'am. Then, yung ginamit namin na call sign sa kabila din, ma'am. Yung sa
Ma'am,
may
if I may,
Dalagang Bukid po.
Huwag mo nang sabihin muna yung rota. Sabihin mo na lang yung nangyari
sir.
sa'yo. Ha?
Nung nag-ano kami, ma'am, nakarating kami ng Sierra Madre around alas 6 na lang po nung umaga. Yung rib 2 na sakay po ng kabilang boat, ma'am, nakatali na po sila sa may likuran. Then didikit na lang po sila sa
Sino ang nakatali? Sa
yung rib 2
BRP?
po.
Ha?
Rib 2, ma'am. Rib number 2.
Alin yun? Marine o Nabsog?
Nabsog. 2 rib lang po yung nakapasok, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
2 Nabsog ang nakapasok. Yung
Yes, po,
Marine
ma'am.
wala.
Sad to say, ma'am, nasiraan daw sila sa pagpasok, ma'am.
Yung 2 nasira?
Yung isa po, ma'am.
Tapos yung isa?
Binadiyan na lang yung isa po, ma'am.
Okay. So yung Nabsog lang ang dumating sa BRP Sierra Madre. Yung isa nakatali na.
Papatali pa lang po, ma'am.
Ha?
Papatali pa lang po, ma'am.
Papatali pa
Yes,
lang.
ma'am.
Doon ka nadali?
Hindi, ma'am.
Teka. Sige, magkwento
Sa
ka.
rib 1 po ako, ma'am. Ngayon po, ma'am, yung rib, nung papatali na po yung rib number 2, Around pa mga 5 minutes na po kami nandoon sa Sierra Madre. Dumating po yung rib, yung inboard rib ng Chinese, ma'am. Hindi ko alam kung Coast Guard ba or plan. Then po, ma'am, ang nangyari, pagkarating po nila agad, wala na pong warning, diniretso na yung pagbangga po. Nagpanggaan na po.
Ilan sila?
Around,
Marami sila? Isang barko lang?
hindi ma'am,
Ilan sila?
walong rib ma'am. Sama na yung aluminum rib ng Coast Guard ma'am, Chinese Coast Guard.
Hindi, yung sa Chinese Coast Guard. Ilan
Walong
sila?
ma'am, walong rib ma'am.
Ilan?
8 more or less ma'am.
8 vessels?
More or less ma'am.
Okay. 8 plus or minus 8. Ilang katao? Yung nakita mo lang, yung alam mo.
Sa bawat rib ma'am.
Ha?
Bawat rib po.
Oo.
More or less din 10 ma'am.
Okay.
Sama operator.
Kayo, ilang kayo?
Sa nabsog lang po ma'am.
Oo, dun sa...
10 ma'am.
Yung sa RIP 1, yung kasama mo.
Yung nabsog ma'am.
Oo.
5 kami ma'am.
Isa plus 4? Ganon?
5 katao
total,
ma'am.
5 lang kayo. So, kalahati lang kayo nung China.
Sa rib ma'am, 5 tao lang din. Bale
Okay.
10. Sa kanila,
10. Sa kanila, 10.
bawat rib.
Bawat trip, tapos
Yes, ma'am.
8 yun.
Yes ma'am.
Okay. Anong ginawa nila? Binangga? Sorry?
More or less lang po yun ma'am.
Oh, yeah, syempre, kung ano lang nakita mo at naaalala. No? Tapos, paano nila sinagupa yung tropa nyo? Sabi mo, dumating, 5 minutes ka pa lang,
Yes, ma'am.
tinatali, biglang dumating sila, napakarain
Yes,
nila, sakay-sakay nila, napakarami ring tao.
Yes ma'am.
Anong ginawa nila? Lumapit sa inyo?
Lumapit
diba?
at biglang
Binangga kayo bigla?
na po ma'am. Yes ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Tapos,
Then yun na po ma'am.
kasi ang nakita namin sa video, di ba, parang binangga kayo, pero hindi na namin nakikita, magulo eh. Tapos, parang may mga hawak sila, di ba? May mga maso, mga piko, hindi ko maintindihan, kutsilyo ba yun?
Palakol ma'am. Palakol.
Ha? Palakol?
po ma'am.
May mga palakol
Fire
sila.
axe.
Lahat sila?
Yung nakita ko ma'am, isang tao lang yung nakita ko na may parax. Pero halos lahat sa kanila ma'am may mga mahabang tubo na may matutulis sa dulo.
Yes.
Kaya
Paano mo nakita, nagbunutan? Habang nagtatali kayo, dumating sila, binangga kayo, tapos naglabas na ng palakol.
ma'am, nung yung kabilang rib ma'am, sila inaano na ma'am, binabangga na tapos tinutusok na yung mismong tube ng pusinisir, yung mga nakatali, yung tali na tinali sa Sierra Madre po, pinagpuputol po nila ma'am. Pero hindi naman pumapayag yung tropa ma'am na putulin nila. Kaya yun ma'am, nagkaroon na ng konting labanan doon ma'am. Pero wala tayong armas
Pero
na gamit.
narinig ba ninyo, nagkaroon ba ng babala o sinigawan ba kayo na maglalapit? Meron bang warning bago sila nagtutusok doon?
Negative ma'am.
Walang salita?
Wala.
Kasi parang yun ang version na sinabi nila, marami daw warning, sinabihan. Wala kayong narinig
Hindi
na.
ko maintindihan yung sigawan ma'am inchik.
Pero may mga sigaw? O sinabihan ba kayo? O, awat kayo dyan? Kahit hindi nyo naintindihan, malalaman mo naman sa tono ng boses, huwag ninyo gagawin yan. Kahit ibang salita, di ba, sa tono pa lang, nagsisigawan na eh. Meron bang ganun?
Yung bago sila ma'am, sigaw, pero yung pagsigaw nila, yun nag-aano na rin sila. Binabangga na rin nila tayo ma'am.
Binabangga na talaga?
Yes ma'am.
Sabay? Wala silang...
Yes ma'am, sabay.
Oo. Siyempre, hindi mo maintindihan kung anong sinasabi nila kasi
Yes, ma'am.
nananakot ba o yung palakol ba, parang itinaas ba sa inyo sa malapit sa katawan, walang ganon?
Hindi siya palakol ma'am, yung parang customized na spear.
Okay.
Yung dulo niya
Yung dulo
parang
niya may
karit.
tusok.
Karit po.
Oo.
Yung iba, tusok.
Pero tinakot ba kayo na parang sasaksakin kayo or tinuro sa katawan ninyo, ganon?
Ang gusto talaga nilang kunin, ma'am, kasi nakapasok na tayo sa Sierra Madre, yung
Oo.
rib talaga namin. Yung rib talaga, ma'am.
Yung rip.
Opo.
Yun ang gusto nilang kunin.
Pero
Pero
kung-
hindi naman nananakot na sasaktan kayo o tinuturo sa
Ganun
katawan.
din, ma'am.
Pareho na rin yun.
Ganun din, ma'am.
Okay. Armado ba kayo nun? Palibhasa, syempre, sundalo kayo, nabsog kayo. Meron kayong barel, kahit tago.
Ang advice sa amin, ma'am, na magdala ng baril.
So, may dala.
Pero tago yun.
Ha?
Tago, ma'am, tago. Nilagay na yun sa box lang, ma'am. Kasi yun ang gagamitin namin. Kami kasi yung papalit sana na tao sa Ayungin po.
Kayo na ang pupunta sa Sierra Madre.
Yes, ma'am. Doon na rin yung rib na may iwan po, dalawang rib, ma'am.
I see. Okay.
Kami yung kapalitan din.
Bakit
Para-
kaya kayo pinadala ng baril kahit nakatago? Gagamitin ba? Syempre, hindi, ano?
Hindi, ma'am. Kabilin-bilin na lang po sa amin, ma'am, sa rules of engagement na magpaputok lang kung pinaputukan tayo.
Magpapaputok lang.
Kung pinaputukan po tayo.
Kung yung ginamit, yung mga pantusok, abay, hindi putok yun. So, hindi kayo magpapaputok talaga.
Yes, ma'am.
So, yung mga
Depensa lang.
spear, palakol, hindi yun pwede.
Depensa lang sa boat natin, ma'am.
Okay.
Ayaw lang namin na sirain nila yung gamit natin.
Nakaakyat, di ba, sila doon sa feed ninyo? Nakaakyat sila sa sinasakyan ninyo, di ba? Andun
Yung-
sa video eh.
Yung ano po, ma'am, yung pwesto po nung nakaakyat na sila, hinila na nila yung rib natin palabas ng Ayungin. Wala. Hindi ko na po masagot, ma'am, kasi nahiwa na naputol na po yung daliri ko. Napaiwan na ako sa Sierra Madre. Yes, ma'am.
Nakuha ba yung baril mo? O yung baril ng kasama?
Yes po, ma'am.
Nakuha?
Yes, ma'am.
Nakuha ang baril mo?
Hindi, wala sa akin, hindi nakuha yung baril. Sa iba ko na tinago, ma'am, eh. Hindi na kasya sa pelican box. Yung baril ko, hindi na nakuha, ma'am. Sa iba ko tinago.
Sa ibang tao?
Hindi, doon ko tinago sa harapan, ma'am. Kaya limang baril po yung...
So, lahat kayo?
Dalawang baril po yung hindi...
Sorry, lahat kayo nakuha ng baril?
Dalawa po kami ang hindi nakunan, ma'am.
Sabi mo, 5 kayo, 2 nakuha
Hindi.
ng baril. Sorry.
Baril, ma'am, baril yung nakuha po.
Sorry?
Dalawang baril, ma'am, ang hindi nakuha. Tapos 5 yung...
2 baril hindi nakuha, pero
Yes,
kung
ma'am.
5 kayo, 5 baril dapat. Nyari sa 3.
Hindi po, ma'am. Yung iba, hindi kasi maiiwan doon ng sayungin yung iba, ma'am. Yung isa babalik po kasi sa ano yun. Papunta sa...
Ano nangyari sa baril? 2 kinuha?
Yung dalawang baril lang po ang hindi nakuha, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Kasi hindi namin nilagay sa pelican box. Yung box na itim po naman.
Naka-box. Oo, nakita ko nga may
Yes, ma'am.
picture doon sa pinakita
Yes,
sa
ma'am.
media. Oo, nandun sa media. So, 2 baril
Hindi.
nakuha. Teka,
Hindi nakuha.
hindi nakuha.
Yes, ma'am.
Ilan ang nakuha? 3 nakuha. Kasi 5 eh.
5, ma'am. Iba yung baril namin, ma'am. 5
nakuha.
5, ma'am, or i-find out ko, ma'am.
Di ka sure.
Pero alam ko, ma'am, 5.
Hindi, kasi 5 kayo, tapos may 2 na nasa box.
Hindi po, ma'am. Yung baril namin na 2 rib, magkasama na yung baril namin doon, ma'am.
Okay.
So, hindi talaga namin intention na kukunin yun.
So, hindi mo talaga bit-bit?
Yes, ma'am. Nakatago talaga yun, ma'am. Tago, ma'am.
Nakatago, naka-box eh, nakita
Yes,
ko sa
ma'am.
picture, ganun. Okay. So, yung baril mo. So, hindi ka sure kung 5 yung nakuha, pero ang alam mo, 5, dahil kada isa sa inyo may
Ay-
bit-bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anong baril yon?
Car 15 po, ma'am.
Ha?
Car 15. Parang M4A1 din.
Ha?
Parang M4A1 pero Car 15. ma'am.
Mm. Okay. So, ano nangyari noon? Yung sasakyan, yung arbit ninyo, hinila ba ng PCG?
Yes, ma'am. Papuntang, palabas
Hinila ng
ng...
PCG? Sinong humila?
CCG, ma'am.
Ha?
CCG.
Ng Chinese?
Yes, ma'am.
Oo. Saan nila dinala?
Hindi ko na maano, pero kwento ng tropa, malayo, ma'am. Malayo sa Ayungin. Kasi naputulan ako ng daliri, ma'am. Nasa Sierra
Paano ka
Madre.
naputulan?
Yung,
Kasi iba-iba yung sinasabi at hindi makita sa video. Sabi nung iba, naipit daw nung binangga. Sabi
Yung-
naman nung iba, yung sa spear. Ano ba
Hindi,
talaga
ma'am.
nangyari? Ikaw lang
yung rib po nila, ma'am, nung unang bangga po sa atin, ito yung rib natin, ma'am, ito yung rib nila. Unang bangga po, hindi siya ganong buwelo. So, gumanon lang yung rib, ma'am. Hindi pa ako nadali nun.
Okay.
Ngayon, nung bumuelo, ma'am, kumuha ng buwelo.
Buwelo.
Tapos, inano kami, binangga kami. Tatlo po kami nasa harapan, baw, ma'am. Tatlo. Ako yung sa kaliwa. Yung dalawa ko pong kasama, ma'am, nasa harapan din. Sa harap, yung isa sa kanan po. Ngayon, yung rib ng kalaban, ma'am, dito sa kaliwa,
Oo.
umangat po, ma'am. Pumatong sa rib natin. Tapos yung kill niya, yung ilalim po na matulis
Right.
na... Nung pagbangga po, na ano pa ako, out of balance, na tumba. Ngayon, ma'am, yung rib na to, yung saan ako bumagsak, doon rin siya bumagsak po, ma'am.
Yung mismong kill.
Ay, doon din
yung
siya
mismong kill,
palabas. Patulis sa ilalim.
Yung patulis, yun ang talagang tumama sa kamay
Yes,
mo.
ma'am.
Maswerte mo naman, kawawa ka naman. Nadali ka. Doon talaga nadali ka na.
Yes, ma'am. Sa pagbangga nila ng... Kasi kung hindi pumatong yung rib nila, ma'am, hindi rin.
Oo, pumatong.
Malakas kasi yung ano nila.
Ay, ibig sabihin ng pumatong. Talaga bumuelo sila para iangat ng todo-todo.
Para banggain tayo, ma'am, pero yun ang nangyari. Pumatong.
Okay. Kailan nila na-disarmahan, nakuha yung mga baril ninyo? Bago naputol ang kamay mo o pakatapos?
Huling part na po yun, ma'am. Huling part na, ma'am.
Huling-huli na.
Yes, ma'am.
After, kinuha na yung mga baril.
Yung tinow na nila yung dalawang rib po, ma'am, palalabas ng Ayungin.
Kinuha na nila yung dalawang rib.
Kinuha nila yung dalawang rib, pinagsisira yung gamit. Doon na sa labas ng Ayungin Shoal, ma'am.
Ang balita, pati yung personal ninyong gamit, yung inyong mga cellphone, sinira din.
Yung dalawang boat guys po, ma'am. Kasi yung gamit nila na cellphone sa pag-navigate, pinatay kasi namin yung navigational system ng rib para hindi maalata nung pagpasok, ma'am.
So, yung pang-navigational, pinatay. Yung personal, anyari?
Yung dalawang tropa, ma'am, yun ang ginamit nilang navigational system, ma'am, yung dalawang cellphone nila. Pinagsisira din.
I see, sinira.
Yes, ma'am.
Tapos, kailan sila umalis? Kailan natapos yung insidente? Ano nangyari? Hinila na nila yung dalawang sasakyan, andun kayo, asan kayo?
Ay, hindi, wala ako doon, ma'am. Nandun ako sa Sierra Madre po.
Nasa Sierra Madre ka na?
Yes, ma'am.
Tapos yung kasamahan mo, nasa Sierra Madre din?
Hindi, tatlo lang po kami yung naiwan sa Sierra Madre, ma'am. Yung iba, ma'am, hinila na papuntang labas ng Ayungin, dalawang rib.
Hinila nino?
Chinese, ma'am.
Ha?
Chinese po, ma'am.
Hinila ng Chinese?
Yes, ma'am.
Tapos, saan sila dinala?
Hindi. Sabi ni ng ma'am, tropa, malapit na daw sa Sabina Shoal.
Okay.
Hindi. Malayo na sa Ayungin, ma'am. Basta hindi na matanaw nila yung Ayungin.
Tapos, iniwan na lang sila ron?
Tinawagan yung Coast Guard, ma'am. PCG.
Yung PCG ang nag-rescue sa kanila?
Yes, ma'am. Nasira na daw.
Kung dalawa kayo sa Sierra Madre, ilang
Tatlo, ma'am. Tatlo po.
Tatlo sa Sierra Madre?
Yes, ma'am. Naiwan.
Tapos, dalawa yung hinila?
Dalawang rib, ma'am, yung hinila. Bale, 7 tao na lang yung naiwan sa... Ay, 7 sa amin, pero may mga tropa pa na civis, ma'am, na kasama namin na sakay sa barko sa rib namin.
Sige.
Sakay na civis.
Masasabi bang aksidente to sa iyo? Kasi nakita mo
Hindi.
unang bangga, tapos ikalawang bangga.
Kung-
Inangat pa yung kill na sinadya talagang makaakyat. Paano ba yun?
Kung...
Ikaw lang sa opinion mo, hindi naman tayo...
Hindi siya may tawag na aksidente, ma'am, eh. Intentional, ma'am, eh.
Okay.
Intentional yung pagbangga, pagbutas, pagsira.
Kung intentional, ano kaya intention nila? Saktan kayo?
Ang
Ganon
intention...
kayo ng armas? Akyatin yung Sierra Madre? Kunin ang barko ninyo? Anong intention nila? Ikaw, kasi nandun ka. Yung kaguluhan na yun, anong pakiramdam mo? Anong gusto nilang gawin?
Sir,
Hindi, opinion mo lang sa kaguluhan na yan.
Yung ayaw na nilang resupply rotation sa Ayungin, ma'am.
Basta ayaw kayong paakyatin.
Ayaw kaming pa-resupplyin, ayaw paakyatin. Kasi, babawasan na yung tao sa Ayungin. Para, yun yung nila, ma'am.
Yun naman, yun ang...
Para sa akin, yung intention.
Sa iyo, yun ang
Yes, ma'am.
intention, harangin yung pagre-resupply at yung pagre-reposition ninyo doon sa...
Resupply and rotation, ma'am.
Oo, ayaw nila talaga na
Yes, ma'am.
makatapos kayo ng mission. Oo.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, may tanong ang ating mga senador. I think si Senador Risa may statement.
Yamanak, Madam Chair. Ayoko lang i-interrupt si Seaman First Class Facundo kanina.
Last na lang. Anong may idadagdag ka pa? Meron ka pang nahalata o napansin
Yes,
o
ma'am.
ibig sabihin?
Ikwento ko na lang, ma'am, kasi hindi ko natuloy yung kwento kanina.
Sorry.
Ayun.
Ay, okay.
Pero
Ano pa
Madam
yung kwento
Chair,
mo?
Kasi-
bago sila
Sorry.
kumpleto ng kwento nila, kung maaari ko lang ipahayag na saludo po ako sa inyo, Seaman First Class Facundo, at sa mga kasamahan ninyo sa rotation and resupply mission na iyon, sa mga kasamahan nyo sa Philippine Navy sa ilalim ng pangunguna ni Vice Admiral Adasi, at gayon din Chief of Staff
Sorry,
Browner.
Risa, patapusin pa natin. Hindi ko
Of course, of course. Of course, gusto ko lang magsaludo kay Seaman First Class Facundo dahil sa tinanaw mong kapansanan dahil sa ginawa ng China laban sa atin, sa inyo. Salamat po.
Yes, Jeff, meron kang idadagdag pa pala. Wala pang
Yes.
ending tong kwento
Yes, ma'am.
natin. Sorry,
Yun po yung nangyari nung nagbanggaan na, ma'am, lahat, ma'am. Umakyat na po kami. Yung naputol na, umakyat na ako sa Sierra Madre. Nung natow na po yung dalawang rib palabas ng Ayungin, nag-attempt po kami ng medical evacuation. Yun nga nangyari. Rubber boat. Nung around 1 nautical mile na kami, ma'am, from Sierra Madre, binutas po ng Coast Guard yung rubber boat namin. Chinese Coast Guard.
Alin ang binutas?
Yung rubber boat po, ma'am, yung maliit.
Yung
Yung
sinasakyan
itim.
ng Medivac?
Kami, ma'am, sakay kami ng medevac. First attempt namin. Then
Okay.
bumalik kami sa Sierra Madre po. Kasi butas na yung
Tama.
lulubog. Pagbalik namin ng ma'am, doon na kami nag-stay hanggang sa gabi ng alas 11 ma'am, na
Ng gabi?
aboard na ako sa Philippine Coast Guard, ma'am, vessel.
Doon ka kinuha na ng Philippine Coast Guard?
Hindi, ma'am, kami yung mismong pumunta sa rib ng Coast Guard, then yung rib ng Coast Guard, ma'am, papunta sa barko nila. Mga 20 nautical miles around 20 nautical miles galing Ayungin Shoal, ma'am.
Tapos, pumunta na kayo sa barko ng Coast Guard?
Yes, ma'am.
Tapos
Yun na po yung huling,
inuwi ka na?
sama na rin yung dalawang boat namin, ma'am. Tinila na rin ng barko ng Coast Guard.
Binutas nila yung sasakyan, pero may sinira rin ba doon sa Sierra Madre?
Wala.
Ang mga Chino, wala.
Nagbato lang sila ng mga corals, ma'am.
Ha?
Binato nila ng mga corals yung tao sa taas ng Ayungin.
Saan galing?
Sierra Madre.
Saan
Sa rib
galing
nila,
yung
ma'am.
coral?
Sa rib nila.
Malamang sa dagat din natin, Madam
Yeah,
Chair.
oo. So, yung Chinese, binato ng
Yes, ma'am.
binato, yung Sierra.
Mga
Kailan to?
Yun, same day, ma'am, ng nangyaring insidente.
Kasi sabi mo, 6 a.m. ka dumating, di ba?
Kami, ma'am.
Kayo, 6
Yes,
a.m.
ma'am.
Di kayo nakaalis hanggang 11 ng gabi?
Ay, hindi po, ma'am. Ako, ma'am.
Hindi, kasi di ba 6 a.m. kayo dumating doon? Anong oras kaya yung mga Chino dumating?
Mga 6:10.
O talaga,
6:05, ma'am. Agad-agad.
Sabi
agad.
mo nga, 5 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. 5 minutes, ganyan.
Anong oras sila umalis?
Nung nahila na nila yung dalawang rib palabas, ma'am.
Mga bandang kailan na yun? Matagal ba kayo? Matagal ba sila ron?
Hindi ko, mga around 1 hour din siguro, ma'am. 1 hour. I-ano ko na lang sa iba, ma'am. Hindi ko nakita yung oras, ma'am, eh.
O, syempre. Pero yung more or less parang isang oras rin yung hinila nila. Tsaka sila umalis.
Yes, ma'am.
I see.
Ay, mag-uumaga na pala. Ay, ano na pala yun, ma'am? Mag-alas 8 ata. Kasi maliwanag na
Taas na yung
Yes,
araw.
ma'am.
O, ang init-init ngayon.
Yes.
After after 1 to 2 hours, nag-alisa na sila.
Yes, ma'am.
After,
Sabay-
nung nakuha yung dalawang,
Rib. Yes,
yung
ma'am.
dalawang rip.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Mula 8 o'clock hanggang alas 11, walang may alam na nandun kayo.
Alam ma'am kasi ano kami ng medevac ma'am, nag-attempt kami ng
yung
first medevac.
Pero yung first attempt ninyo, anong oras yun?
Around 9 a.m. din, 8 or 9 din ma'am. Agad-agad din ma'am. Nung nahila na yung dalawang rib, nag-ano rin kami ma'am, nag-rubber boat din kami. Kasi habulin nga ma'am, habulin namin sila. Para,
Kahit dugoan
hindi,
ka?
para sa medevac ma'am, sama kami sa kanila. Pero hindi namin alam na, hindi ko pa kasi alam na that time na hinihila na pala yung rib natin ma'am.
Tama. So, bumalik na lang kayo sa Sierra Madre at mag-intay kasi wala na kayong choice.
Kasi binutas nila yung
Binutas yung
rubber boat
yung
natin
rubber
ma'am.
boat.
Yes ma'am.
So, nag-intay kayo gabing-gabi na, alas 11, halos sa
Alas 7 kami nakaalis sa Ayungin ma'am. Then around 11, mag-12 na ng midnight, nakarating kami sa barko ng Coast Guard ma'am, PCG.
Okay. Okay. May dadagdag ka pa? Anong pakiramdam mo nung panahon na yan?
Wala, okay lang man sa akin na
Okay lang, sige
wala,
lang.
wala man akong ano ma'am, yung pinag-alala ko lang kasi yung nawawala yung dalawang rib namin.
Tama.
Nandoon yung tropa din na kasama doon.
Yung mga kasama mo?
Yes, ma'am.
Inaalala mo lang yun?
Yes, ma'am.
Oo.
Yan lang ma'am.
Wala kang nararamdaman na iba? Wala kang sakit o tama maliban sa daliri mong nadali?
Ayos na ma'am, na napagaling naman sa hospital. Nagre-recover lang na amoebiasis.
Oo nga, tama. Maraming salamat at
Thank you ma'am. Thank you ma'am.
apakatindi ng dinaanan ninyo. Back to Senator Risa po.
Yamanak, Madam Chair. So ibig sabihin, sinaktan na nung mga Chino yung sundalo natin sa Philippine Navy, binutasan pa nila yung rubber boat para hindi siya makatanggap ng medical attention. Ang galing talaga, Madam Chair. Yung opening statement ko po sana kanina, kaya lang ayaw ko ngang i-interrupt si Seaman First Class Facundo. Preliminarily po, kaugnay nung unang agenda natin ngayong araw, at the proper time, maghahabol na lang po ako ng ilang mga tanong sa Department of National Defense tungkol sa ating cyber defense doctrine kaugnay nung Chinese influence operations. Pero kaugnay po nitong ating kasalukuyang agenda, Madam Chair, China's actions at Ayungin Shoal must be condemned repeatedly and relentlessly. As a Filipino and as a senator, I share the hurt and pain of the Philippine Navy over our wounded personnel. China severely violated not only international law, but our human rights. This is unacceptable. Violence should not be committed on our seas. We must push for a de-escalation in the West Philippine Sea. Our security establishment, however, has to be prepared for continuous unlawful escalation by the Chinese government. We have to be prepared for every contingency. What are the probable scenarios? Are we prepared for a blockade by the People's Liberation Navy, Chinese Coast Guard, and maritime militia? A blockade of the BRP Sierra Madre? The rules of engagement established by our policymakers have to be very clearly and carefully communicated to the boots on the ground, or on the water in this case. We don't need any misunderstandings or miscalculations. Are our contingency plans aligned with those of our allies? I call on government to put politics and diplomacy consistently at the captain's wheel, with the Philippine Coast Guard, Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, fisherfolk, and civilian actions. Let us optimize every legal, political, and diplomatic potential to preserve Philippine national interests, security, and peace in the region. Agyamanak, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Do I proceed to my questions, Madam Chair?
Thank you very much. If you will allow, may kasalanan ako eh. hindi ko napag-oath sa si Jeffrey Facundo, nakimarites na ako kagad. Pero lahat ng sinasabi ninyo, nasa record naman natin at inaasahan ko na lahat ng sinasabi mo ay tama. Pakinalang bigay ng oath, saka sakali hahanapin pa natin siya. Secretary, please. Atrasado.
Ma'am,
Pasensya.
may correction pala ako, ma'am.
Yes, teka muna. Mag-oath man tayo kahit kapraso na lang.
Pitong
Teka.
baril pala yun, ma'am. 7 baril yung nakuha.
Okay, sige, teka muna. Comsec.
Mali pala yung 5, ma'am. Sorry.
Mary, punto
Kaya
na yung
nagkakagulo sa addition tayo eh. Okay. Sa
Hearsay na
Comsec,
lang sa
Dana,
kanya yun
please.
Hearsay
Sir?
na lang yung baril sa kanya kasi hindi naman niya alam. I think later, ma'am, we can give a more factual account
Okay.
on a executive session. Sa kanya, hearsay na lang yung alam
O, tama. Okay. Hindi rin namin makita, puro video lang pinanood namin. So, Comsec, please, yung... Opa.
Sir Facundo, Mary, punto mayo. Salamat po. Pakitaas po yung kanang kamay. And repeat after me. I state your name. Do hereby swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this proceeding. Thank you.
Okay. Ikaw talaga. Sige, maraming salamat. The chair acknowledges the arrival of Senator Tolentino as well. And I believe Senator Risa, Secretary Manalo wants to make a statement so that he can be excused. Is that correct?
Thank you, ma'am. I could stay on till about noontime, if that's
Okay.
possible.
Okay, that being the case, we'll abide by our rather tight schedule. Senator Ontiveros, please.
Yamanak, Madam Chair. And I won't ask any questions that are too specific since national security is involved. First question, Madam Chair. Either of our...
Sorry,
yes, Madam Chair.
This is getting quite disorderly. Kasalanan ko. Si Senator Tolentino, may opening statement po ba? Pasensya.
Wala po, Madam Chair. Sorry for being late.
No issues. Senator Risa, please.
Yamanak, Madam Chair. So either of our good secretaries could take this, please, or both if they wish. What measures is government taking to de-escalate the tension in the West Philippine Sea, Madam Chair? I think Secretary Manalo, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Perhaps in response to that, I could also deliver my short statement because it was addressed on that particular point. I just wanted first to thank you, Senator Marcos, for giving us this opportunity. I just want to say that initially the Department of Foreign Affairs, immediately after the aggressive actions just reported on, denounced these actions, and we also highlighted the fact that they led to the injury of Filipino personnel and damage to our vessels. We issued a public statement on this to this effect, and we also approached the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as their embassy here. We sternly communicated to our counterparts that it was really incomprehensible how the delivery of basic necessities to our troops on the BSP Sierra Madre could be considered a provocation that would justify an increased level of Chinese actions. And so, therefore, we believe their actions only intensified and escalated tensions. And certainly something we should be concerned about. While we have a policy still, as agreed by President Marcos and President Xi Jinping, that we agreed our government should seek to manage our maritime differences and not let incidents define our bilateral relations, it's clear that many of these recent incidents by China are inconsistent with this declared intention. Nevertheless, the Department of Foreign Affairs, in consultation with the National Maritime Council, which by the way met last Friday to look at the issue, we still believe it's the primacy of dialogue and diplomacy should prevail, even in the face of these serious incidents. Though, of course, I admit it's also a challenge. Nevertheless, we will pursue the peaceful resolution of disputes in accordance with international law, specifically the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the 2016 Arbitral Award. And we have been working hard to bring back China to the table to talk with us to resolve differences on these issues. We have an existing mechanism with China. We call it the bilateral consultation mechanism on South China Sea. We had a working group meeting last week in preparation for what we hope will be a meeting between the bilateral of the BCM, or bilateral consultation mechanism. We hope to be held in early July with our Chinese counterparts, specifically to discuss the recent incidents, but also to see whether we can arrive at some understandings which could help. Understandings, what I mean, some kinds of confidence-building measures, which could hopefully create a basis then for more serious discussions to see how we can address these other issues. We have also been in touch quite intensively with our international partners, many of whom, and in fact all of whom, who share our basic position on the importance of international law, a rules-based order, and we are working closely with them in other fora, including last week, even in the United Nations. We issued a number of statements, and we've received support from a number of countries who agree with us on our approach on the need for respect for a rules-based order, international law, especially in the South China Sea, especially with respect to UNCLOS. So we will continue to pursue these efforts, and also let me just assure the committee and the Filipino people that while we are seeking the approach for a peaceful resolution through international law, diplomacy, of course, we are not blind to the incidents which are happening, and we will ensure that whatever confidence-building measures we achieve, they will be not at the expense of the promotion of our sovereignty, sovereign rights, as well as our rights and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. Thank you very much.
Salamat, Madam Chair, at salamat na pareho na kasama sa measures na tinitake ng gobyerno para mag-de-escalate ang tensyon sa West Philippine Sea, yung dialogue, yung peaceful resolution ng conflict, na kapag kinakailangan, tulad ngayon, lalo na, yung boses ng bansa natin sa dialogue at peaceful resolution na yan ay malakas at mataas pa nga. Dahil din gaya ng pinaalala ni Seaman First Class Facundo, bukod sa ginawa ng China sa kanya at sa ibang mga Philippine Navy personnel natin doon, nakita po naman, Madam Chair, sa videos yung paggamit din ng mga Chino ng siren na nakakarinde sa mga tao natin, yung laser, yung na strobe na para ma-disorient yung ating mga tao, at yung paalala ni Seaman First Class Facundo na may dalawang rigid hull inflatable boats pa tayo at yung mga tauhang nakasakay doon na hinahanap pa rin natin. So ano ba yun? Practically kinidnap ng mga Chino. So salamat dun sa pagpapatuloy ng gobyerno nung preferred process natin, at the same time yung malakas na pag-communicate sa China laban sa ginagawa nilang ganitong, sabi nga ni Sec Manalo, incomprehensible at hindi talaga katanggap-tanggap. Sana maging mabunga yung parating na bilateral consultation meeting, bagamat sa ganitong mga aggressive actions, mukhang tayo lamang ang interesado sa dialogue at peaceful resolution, at kulang na kulang ang pagpapakita ng China ng ang tawag doon, good faith at the table. Kasunod na tanong, Madam Chair, anong strategic at tactical objectives ang hinahabol ng Chinese government kaugnay ng BRP Sierra Madre at Ayungin Shoal? Kasi baka, depending on our view of what their objectives are, we should give some thought to countering their strategy, Madam Chair.
Ma'am, to get a full exposition of it, I'll rather in an executive session.
Very well
we can be
taken,
candid and
Secretary.
forthright.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair. Thank you.
Let's go back to the narration. I think quite a few of our colleagues, including the Senate President, would like a briefing in executive session. So proceed lang tayo sa alam na ng publiko at nagnanais ng kaliwanagan.
But I think
Yes,
Coast Guard,
Senator Tolentino,
Admiral
please.
Gaban is raising his hand.
Yes,
Possibly
Admiral
recognized.
Gavan, I believe Coast Guard District Palawan, CG Captain Dennis Rem Silabay is also online. Thank you we see Captain Labay. Wala lang kayong video. Paki-on lang yung video po. At narito yung bossing ninyo, si G. Gavan. Nais ninyo sumagot. Yes, okay, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ma'am, I'd like to take this opportunity to shed light lang po or to correct the statement earlier made that there are still 2 ribs belonging to the Navy which are missing. Those were already recovered at the time. So there's no missing boat at this point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Maraming salamat para doon.
Nor personnel. All the personnel were recovered by the Coast Guard at the time.
Maraming salamat
Thank
po,
you.
Admiral, Madam Chair. May I proceed with my questions, Madam Chair?
Yep.
Yamanak, Madam Chair. So I'll just try my questions and will gladly give way kapag may iba pa na sa executive session mas mabuting pag-usapan. Ano po yung legal implications ng isang dayuhang bansa diretsyong nagda-damage sa isang Philippine Navy vessel, naninira ng equipment at umaagaw ng mga sandata natin, Madam Chair?
Senator Ontiveros, perhaps we can
Yes, Madam Chair.
discuss these questions together in executive session.
When?
In the meantime, if you'll allow me, let's just set down the narration of facts so that it's clear to the public exactly what happened. Okay lang, hold in abeyance muna yung question na yan.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so one detail that caught my attention, tulad nga ng sinabi ni Jeff Facundo, during the previous incidents last year, the units involved were Coast Guard units. This time, the mention has been made of NAVSOCOM as well as Marines. It was always the Philippine Coast Guard before. Now we are seeing military deployment. Has there been a change in strategy in the RORE missions? We note that there were no Coast Guard vessels at all accompanying these resupply vessels for the first time.
There were. Yes, ma'am. And the
There were,
tactical...
hindi lang nabanggit. So what
Hindi-
happened? Kasi dalawang reef na,
We can-
dalawang reef na Navy, dalawang reef na Marine. Nasira
Coast
yung
Guard
Marine,
vessels.
tapos yung Navy na tuloy, umakyat sa Sierra Madre, pero yung Coast Guard nakatutok din. It's not
Nakatutok
like
po.
they weren't there.
Nakatutok po.
Okay,
Tapos
sige.
meron pa pong ibang mga elemento na hindi po namin pwede discuss ngayon.
There's no need. We just need to be clarified kasi
Coast Guard
maraming
was
nagtatanong.
involved from the planning and in the execution, ma'am.
Pero
Nandun
kasi
sila.
nagulat kami, bakit yung nadali, militar. Dati kasi hindi militar,
Kahit
di
na
ba,
naman
Coast Guard?
noon po, hindi pumapasok sa Ayungin yung Coast Guard. Naghahatid lang po.
Hanggang hatiran lang.
Opo.
Pero Navy talaga nakatutok.
Ang,
Tama ba? Yung
ang,
NAVSOCOM
yung
talaga.
nung araw po, yung UM1, UM2, naalala nyo po yung mga vessels na yun.
So, there were PCG vessels in the area.
Yes, ma'am.
What was their role since they
Ma'am,
weren't visible?
we can disclose it later because it was a whole tactical plan which we cannot
The
disclose.
other
in
issue
public.
is, if they were nearby and they were in the area, bakit nag-intay sina Jeff at yung nasaktan ng 12 oras to rescue a Filipino soldier who was seriously injured?
I think
It
the
sounds
question,
like the Coast Guard was very far away. Is that correct? Maybe Coast Guard Labay, nandun ka sa Palawan, CG Gaban, ang layo naman kung 12 oras nag-iintay itong mga to. Yes po.
Yes, just to make sure that the public is not misled. The Coast Guard was there around 12 nautical miles away from the main engagement area. And as early as around 8 o'clock, we were already preparing to do the rescue. But of course, we have to imagine that the tension was
8
very...
o'clock ng umaga o 8 o'clock ng hapon?
in the morning, around more or less...
8
around-
a.m.
around
malapit na kayo.
No, we were
You were
already
there,
preparing
Okay.
to launch our ribs and do the rescue. But we have to be very conscious as well that the situation at the time was very tense. So the
Naabutan
Philippine
ninyo yung mga Chinese Coast Guard?
Yes, there
Nakita
are
ninyo?
may ship-to-ship communications naman po on the ground, Your Honor. So
And what did they communicate?
Actually, the China Coast Guard informed the Philippine Coast Guard that there were Navy personnel injured. So
Anong sabi ninyo?
that we will render rescue operations. So,
Madam Chair.
Umangal sila na may Filipino military
the
nagsumbong
rest-
sa inyo.
the rest, Madam Chair, maybe I can share in executive
Fine.
session, but at this
That's-
point, I just would like to, if I'm be allowed
That you
to.
were in fact there.
Yeah, we were
And
in
you
fact
were-
there. The Coast Guard did everything it can to render aid to the soldiers, and we did.
Kasi maraming nagsasabi, katagal-tagal ng 12 oras.
Yes, the whole process took
Kung
more
may
than
duguan,
12 hours
napakatagal
because
nun.
it was a very tense situation and we had to continuously communicate with the other side, employing everything we can.
You
And
had
we
continuous...
succeeded.
Sorry.
We succeeded eventually,
Okay.
but it took a while.
All
But
right.
we did. So we did three things.
Madam Chair.
We
Yes,
extracted
let's allow him to finish.
We extracted the personnel, we provided medical aid, and we towed the destroyed boats. All the requirements needed by the military was provided by the Coast Guard at the time. I just would like to disabuse public minds that the Coast Guard was late. We were there, and we did our
Yes,
best.
kasi parang gano'n ang lumalabas kasi
No.
nga napakatagal daw.
No.
Naghintay lang kayo na humupa ang tensyon. Ganon?
We did not wait. We even did our part to accelerate the de-escalation of the tension at the time.
What did you do to de-escalate?
We employed our female radio operators, the angels of the sea.
Anong ginawa nila?
And somehow the psychological element played up, and the tension
Ganon?
subsided
Madam
at the
Chair?
time. So
May
malaki po ang
interjection
role
lang.
ng kababaihan, Madam
Teka
Chair.
muna, nauna si Senator
Yes, ma'am.
Tolentino po. Okay, so you did three things. You said you managed to rescue personnel, is that correct? Medical assistance, and lastly, you actually towed the two destroyed boats. So, in fact, it wasn't like the Coast Guard was sleeping on the job, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like the public to be aware of that.
Ma'am,
Yes.
may I
Thank you,
add,
Madam
I
Po.
confirm the assistance and the support of the Coast Guard from the inception of the operation to the end. They performed their roles as they were supposed to do.
Yes, Senator Tolentino, please, on the same topic.
Yeah, on same topic, Madam Chair, since we are crisscrossing, tiptoeing, and probably threading the thin line between matters of national security and intricate
Yes,
details,
we will be-
perhaps an executive session might
yes,
be-
we have agreed on executive session, and even the Senate President would like to attend, but I think it's a matter of public interest that we lay down at least the narration of facts so that it's clear-cut and non-controversial, and that the public is disabused of so much that's come out in the
It's the
media.
same, Madam Chair. Maybe just request the resource persons present here that you exercise prudence once you detail the narrative that you want to emphasize, because matters of national security again would be crossed. So kayo na po exercise the necessary discretion in narrating what you know.
I think nalilito rin yung tao dahil yung PCG, normally, yung spokesman ninyo, lumalabas with statements, ito, parang support role kayo. As a matter of fact, hindi kayo nag-statement for a change. Parang ganun eh, kasi nauuna kayo dati mag-statement. So akala ng tao, wala talaga yung PCG. Is this a PCG or is it an AFP operation? Yes, Senator.
Ma'am, it's an
Secretary.
AFP operation.
AFP operation. And
Yes, ever since, ma'am, it's an AFP, but of course, we need to change
it's an
our...
AFP operation.
Yes.
That's unqualified.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that being
Since before.
Since before.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's never been a PCG. Why was it that parang nauuna magsalita yung PCG dati?
Well, ma'am, because the AFP has a discipline, particularly now, we are perfecting it, of operational security and
Okay.
information management.
So pero first time ngayon na nahuli si...
We have been introducing our new operational security paradigm slowly, in accordance also with our capability upgrades and our force protection and integrity mechanisms. That is why there's been some sort of shift.
So in fact, the shift only occurs in the media repertorial end. Ibig sabihin, it's always been AFP as an operation, and it's only now that the AFP was the first to speak. Yun lang yung pagre-release
Yes,
ng
ma'am.
balita. Pero
Yes.
actually, mulat sa poll, AFP na to.
Yes, ma'am, because the vessel being resupplied is an Philippine Navy vessel.
Nabanggit kasi ni Senator Ontiveros dun sa de-escalation of tensions at nabanggit rin ni Secretary Manalo, isn't it advisable that we stick to the old routine of using civilian units such as the Coast Guard to conduct the RORE and
The Coast Guard, ma'am,
de-escalate?
has never been used to conduct RORES.
So RORE has always been military. You're saying this as far as when?
We can discuss it, ma'am, but it has been since the start. It has been
The start, that's President
several
Aquino?
years ago. Yes, ma'am.
From President Aquino?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Okay. Okay. There's been a suggestion to use helicopters, and then there were different opinions na yung helicopter, mas
We can
magulo.
discuss
May
it.
helipad kasi yung BRP Magbanwa, di ba?
Ma'am, we can discuss it later.
Okay, but that was one of the possibilities, and
There's
then
several options that have
that's
been.
an option ba, to take off from Magbanwa and then rappel down to Sierra Madre?
All those options, ma'am, are viable options that
Ah,
are,
they're viable.
and we leave it to the Admiral Torres, being the
Siyempre.
Westcom commander, to decide what the appropriateness.
Sure,
of-
but they're all being studied, I understand. Is that correct?
Yes,
Kasi
ma'am.
ang daming haka-haka sa media. Gusto lang namin na aalagaan at nababantayan na pagtatanggol natin ang ating mga sundalo kung may mas safe, ika nga, na walang masyadong mapanganib at walang madali, mas okay sana, no?
Opo, ma'am. Naturally, ma'am, in accordance with the statement of the President, the welfare of the soldiers and the safety are paramount. And let me also digress to the question of Senator Intiveros, if I may be permitted. President has said we're not in the business of instigating wars. Nonetheless, we have to really be conscious of our obligations under Article 1 of the Constitution, that our territorial integrity and sovereignty are not compromised. And we're playing a very, very delicate balance here between not compromising our sovereignty and sovereign rights through acquiescence or any form of permission seeking or countenancing by another party, with balancing the safety of our people and the risk of a miscalculation. Therefore, the rules of engagement have been very strict, and I join our country in praising the restraint and professionalism shown by our troops, because one shot in anger could have ignited something which, fortunately, because of the superior training and discipline of the troops, was not done, did not happen. Nonetheless, our mandate really is to ensure that none of our sovereign rights and our sovereignty and territorial integrity are compromised. And I think the troops are very, very, they're very adamant in performing this mission with as much professionalism as they can. So in addition to the de-escalation that the DFA is mandated to do, on the other hand, we have a mandate to continue with our resilience and our building up of a credible deterrent force at the soonest possible time. Because that is the only way we can sustain a credible and fair diplomatic negotiated settlement without violating our Constitution. Thank you, Madam
Thanks
Chair.
very much, Secretary. That explains that. And Senator Ontiveros, are there other questions that we can settle the narrative?
Ma'am, may I take a West
shortly?
Philippine Sea break for a short while?
Mahabang
allowed.
panahon yon, Madam Chair. West Philippine Sea. Rore lang po. Maybe I can just make of record my questions, Madam Chair, at kung sa executive session lamang pwedeng pag-usapan.
Ay,
Okay,
tama,
I
tama.
can accept, Madam Chair. But just to make them of record, itatanong ko rin po sana dito or sa executive session na are we prepared for all possible scenarios? Can we resupply the BRP Sierra Madre in the face of what looks to be a blockade by the plan, the CCG, and Maritime Militia, blockade of the BRP Sierra Madre? What steps have we taken to prevent miscalculation from both sides? Are our contingency plans aligned with those of our allies? And can we develop more contingency plans with our allies to respond to all possible scenarios to deter China from escalating the situation further and to reinforce the BRP Sierra Madre? So yun po yung mga tanong ko pa, Madam Chair. Are there any here that the good resource persons would care to? Madam Chair, I think si Admiral Gavan.
Yes, Admiral Gavan is here, and we also have Coast Guard District Head in Palawan, Captain Labay. Baka may sagot po
Thank you,
kayo.
ma'am. Just would like to add to the statement of the kind SND. Tama po yun that the Coast Guard was not used in the RORE itself. But there was an instance where the Coast Guard was also used for medical evacuation, which is not part of the RORE. There was a situation before this RORE where the Coast Guard...
Pero bahagi rin, dulot rin ng RORE o walang kinalaman?
Yes, maybe...
Kailan yun?
It was last month. We can provide the details.
Last
later.
month?
Yes, ma'am. So
That's
I'd
May?
like
No, that's May, as early as May?
May 19.
Okay.
So, ma'am, I
And-
mentioned this to highlight that the Coast Guard has other use as well.
Are you saying
in
that
this.
there was already a Filipino soldier that was hurt? May?
I think he was sick.
Nagkasakit lang?
Yes, and we had to evacuate.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I think you were answering Senator Ontiveros. That's your answer po?
No, ma'am. I only supported the statement of the kind SND when he mentioned that the Coast Guard was not involved in the RORE. I just would like to add that while we were not used in the actual RORE itself, that portion where we had to go alongside the ship, the Coast Guard in an instance before was also used to conduct medical evacuation to extract our sick personnel. Thank you, ma'am.
Salamat. Yeah? Senator Ontiveros?
If the resource persons don't care to answer my other questions, baka sa executive session
Okay.
na lamang po.
Si Senator Tolentino
Yes,
raw.
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
On your cyber, ma'am, I can.
Just one question probably which can be answered here. I recall having written a few hours after the incident, the DFA secretary, it's about the possibility of engaging the International Committee of the Red Cross if ever there would be a need to really have a neutral organization do the resupply mission. What was the, is there any response from the ICRC based in Geneva, sir? Ako rin kasi yung tinatanong ano nangyari dun sa letter ko.
Thank you.
Is that a possibility? Has the letter been relayed to ICRC?
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Yeah, of course, that is a possibility, but I have some reservations on that. And maybe during the executive session, could we be allowed to explain why there might be some, though the idea is certainly very interesting.
Yung sagot ko noon, sir, ICRC is providing the resupply to Rafah, to
Pero
Gaza, even during World War II, that famous Stalag 3 incarceration camp.
There are implications. There are implications if we request the ICR because they only come in under certain situations.
Okay. So dapat kasi ang purpose natin ngayon maliwanagan din ng tao eh. Baka ang sabihin ng iba nagsulatan lang tayong dalawa. So dapat malaman din ng taong bayan kung ano yung naging tugon doon sa liham patungkol doon sa ICRC. And I'm not referring to the National Red Cross. It's the ICRC founded 1863. Ang tagal na nun.
Yes, sir. In fact, we were preparing a draft, pero since you raised it now, a draft response. Pero maybe I can give you the gist of the response you made. Thank you.
Maraming salamat. Ganon, pwedeng magtanong dahil nga kinakailangan maliwanagan ng tao, no? Medyo nalilito ang lahat kasi nung una, ang sinabi ni Senator, well, binanggit na rin ni Senator Ontiveros, pero ang una, sinabi ni Secretary Chodoro na itong Ayungin incident, it was a true obstacle to the peace and the stability in the South China Sea. General Browner proceeded to say that this was tantamount to an act of piracy. However, last Friday, Executive Secretary Bersamin labeled the matter as a mere accident or misunderstanding. And then less than 48 hours later, Secretary Chodoro again said this is not an accident. Are we flip-flopping with the characterization of what occurred? It seems fairly clear from what we heard from our Navy and our Coast Guard what occurred. What exactly occurred and how do we term it? Kasi hindi rin kami nakakaintindi at litong-lito na ang mamayang Pilipino sa naririnig na parang paiba-iba naman ata tayo. Secretary Chodoro.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The Executive Secretary was interviewed on the aftermath of the the second National Maritime.
Gibo, that was 5 days after the incident.
Yes, ma'am.
And it can hardly be a preliminary assessment 5 days after.
At that time, ma'am, after the national.
Limang araw nakalipas, nasabi na ni General Browner, piracy ito. So he was able to conclude that. Why did the ES Bersamin conclude something completely different?
No, he did not conclude, ma'am. If you notice, being a Chief Justice, he used the terms probably, and he wanted to make sure of his facts.
I think there was no probably
There
about
was, ma'am.
the mere misunderstanding or accident.
No, ma'am,
Walang
I think there was
yun.
probably, if we review the transcript, and he was asked about whether or not it was considered an armed attack. And somehow, it was, in answering that question, he said it was probably even a misunderstanding or whatnot.
I'll have to review the same, but
I distinctly recall, ma'am, I think.
Is that so?
Yes, ma'am. I think the staff can check the record of the transcript.
regardless, it gave the impression that you were downplaying the incident following the meeting of the National Maritime
No.
Council. Kaya nalilito po tayo kasi nung umpisa, pirata na to. At saka talagang aggressive and illegal act of attack, ano? Pagkatapos noon, naging misunderstanding na lang.
No, after that, ma'am,
So,
we have
medyo
to-
nahihilo na kami. Hindi na namin
Hindi,
alam
ma'am.
paano ipaliwanag to eh.
dating Chief Justice po si ES, sigurado po siya dapat sa facts niya bago yun ho ang disiplina niya, yun ho ang training niya. Now, before po this
5 days after the National Security Council, the DND didn't have
Well,
enough
ma'am, for the
information.
No, for 2 to 3 days, ma'am, we were.
The former Chief Justice?
No, ma'am, it was the first time that we had met. As a matter of fact, during the incident, the Chief of Staff and I were in Korea to launch the 2 ships that are going to be delivered. So we had to hurry home and get stock of the situation because right now, ma'am, we're really implementing the area command concept where the primary decision maker will be the area commander.
I'm a little confused because 5 days later, there wasn't sufficient information, but General Browner already told us, talagang lumaban mga Pilipino with their bare hands. I distinctly recall that. This was before the National Maritime meeting. Are we saying that nobody from NMC, DND, and SA bothered to ask General Browner?
No, there were,
Anong
ma'am.
ibig sabihin niya nun?
We did, but in the NMC meeting, these were one of the agenda items, and the rest of the agenda items were the recommendations to the president. But even before this, the president had already scheduled a visit to Westcom. where he was able to personally spend time with each and every one. And after that, it came out already that he made the determination himself already in spite
Pero
of the
kawawa pa
NMC.
yata si ES dyan dahil
Yes, ma'am. I think so because
ano ba nangyari dyan? Parang walang proper verification, sinalang siya sa presko, nagsalita siya, ngayon linalaglag ng lahat. Anong klase yun?
hindi ho naglalaglag, but there's no intention to do that. He's our primus inter pares, naturally. But I'm just explaining the context.
Where are we now, Secretary?
We are now on the statement of the President in
Well, the
Palawan.
statement of the president was very general. We're not in the business of war.
No,
I mean,
it is,
what is now the official characterization of what occurred in Ayungin?
which is the reason for our press conference yesterday, to clarify that the incident is not a misunderstanding.
If you would put it on record, please, since we've heard so much,
Yes, ma'am.
that is so confusing.
I think, ma'am, that if I can introduce into the record the written transcript, I will submit it later for
Thank you.
from
But in
the
general,
PCO.
if you can provide the gist for
The
those
gist
who are
is,
here
ma'am,
present.
it was a deliberate and deliberate attack, a deliberate aggressive action by China and an illegal use of force. So it is not a misunderstanding or an accident. And that is for the record, ma'am.
And ES Bersamin, as well as former General Centino, are all in agreement with this?
Yes, ma'am.
This is now the official position?
Yes, it
Hindi
is
na
the
to magbabago?
No, ma'am, it is the position of the whole government, the executive branch of the government now.
Some people have made the connection that the defense establishment in the Philippines suddenly flip-flopped on what they had previously said upon the remarks of a certain Colonel Ray Powell. Who is he? In the website called Sea Light, he said that it was a deliberate attack and that he is the author of aggressive transparency. Who is he and why are his words perceived to be so influential in the course of action of the DND, such that within 24 hours, we suddenly have a vault fast?
There is no connection between Ray Powell and our establishment, ma'am. Let me be clear about it. We have our own processes. I'm assiduous in guarding the independence of our agency. We receive inputs from a lot of sources. However, as our officers can attest, I've been very, and the chief of staff and the president, the commander-in-chief himself, as part of our upgrade measures, are very assiduous in building up our capability to assess, process, and gather intelligence on our own, and to make ourselves more resilient in line with our...
You know him?
I know him
Colonel
personally.
Ray Powell. I
know
know
him
that he's in and
personally.
out of the Philippines. And is it true that assertive transparency, which apparently is the policy today, given that we have the media cover these events as well as invite even media personnel, is it true that he authored this policy and
I
that
would
we
not
are abiding
know,
by
ma'am.
it on his suggestion?
I would not know because the policy of the DND is military operations coupled with operational security and
We-
information operations.
Military spokesmen speak of the transparency strategy. Exactly the words this American consultant uses. Is that an accident?
Probably, ma'am, because the transparency options were developed by our staff and by
I think DDG
Director
and
General
ikaw
Hericos.
to bolt in. Sige. Kasi
Yes.
naangkin niya na siya daw ang nag-imbento ng assertive transparency and he would like to step up the promotion of his transparency strategy again to discourage or prevent the holding of dialogues between the Philippines and China. Can you just comment?
Yes, ma'am, but
I think this has gotten quite a lot of media play, so I need a conclusive statement from your group.
thank you very much, Madam Chair. And esteemed senators, the transparency initiative that the National Task Force is implementing is part of our national security
Kailan
strategy.
umpisa?
We've been doing that, Madam Chair.
I read the people say measured transparency. Is that correct?
Yeah,
When did that come into
we
play?
started with measured, then there was assertive, then eventually for us to be politically correct, we adopted the transparency initiative, Madam Chair, on the level of the National Task Force on West Philippine Sea. That was the time when we were able to
Kailan umpisa?
as early as second quarter of 2023, Madam Chair. When the National Task Force on West Philippine Sea did the workshop for the crafting of the national strategy for West Philippine Sea.
Was Colonel Powell or any one of his group
He was never involved during the
I see.
crafting. And the transparency,
So does transparency work?
yes, indeed, Madam Chair.
So many would observe that the opposite has actually occurred. Mas maraming magulo, may insidente mula nitong second quarter hanggang sa ngayon. Dati tahimik nga yan, di nga natin nababalitaan. Parang mas gumulo eh.
Madam
Tama
Chair.
ba? O hindi?
Uh,
Yes, Senator Ontivero.
Just a quick follow-up, Madam Chair, and the good director, Deputy Director General may also care to comment on it. Ako naman po, it's the first time I'm hearing yung ating mga resource persons discuss about measured or assertive or transparency initiative. Na-appreciate ko po ito kasi usually transparency is mentioned in tandem with end accountability. And ito yung isang kailangan nating masingil talaga sa China. Kasi siya, gawa ng mga ginagawa niya laban sa atin, tayo pang ginagaslight. Yung gagawin niya sa atin, iaako sa patayo na tayong gumagawa sa kanya. So there's no accountability she's showing towards us. Kaya, just for the record, Madam Chair, na-appreciate ko itong transparency initiative na tinatalakay ng ating resource person sa atin because it is the twin of accountability na siguro isa sa mga prinsipyo ng maayos na pakikipag-ugnayan ng mga kapitbahay sa isa't isa. Salamat, Madam Chair.
Yes, perhaps we allow the director to finish. So sa palagay ninyo, talagang okay itong transparency initiative, nakakatulong. Kahit sa pakiwari ng iba, lumala pa yung mga enkwentro sa West Philippine Sea.
Yes, Madam Chair. It is our belief that this strategy that we're implementing, it helps us a lot. If you noticed, we have able to get the support of the international community because
Nalalaman nila
in
sa
this
wakas.
in this method, it is not difficult for us to tell the truth. I believe telling the truth will never be difficult, and we know for a fact that we were able to overcome the narrative of the adversary in the region. So that's why the support of the international community we were able to get and able to make our stand and fight for our sovereign rights, sovereignty and territory in the area, Madam Chair.
Senator Tolentino, please. Thank you very much, DDG Erico.
Karugtong po nung sinabi nyo, DDG Jericho, ito yung transparency. Sa kabilang banda po, ano po yung, para ma-educate na rin kami at yung ating mga kababayan nakikinig ngayon, ano naman yung sa kabilang dulo ng transparency? Ano naman yung, huwag mo i-discuss yung kung GSI, ano yung kine-claim naman ng kabila? Pang counterbalance, is there a counter transparency? Ano yun?
To our point, Madam Chair, the counterbalance of the other side, which to us as a country, we believe they do have the excessive claims in the area. That's why we are fighting for our sovereign rights, that we do have the sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. And on the other side, why we should believe of their narrative of an excessive claim which doesn't belong to them. That's why we are doing this transparency initiative for the Filipino people to be aware, not to bring disorder or not to bring chaos on the issues. Because as we believe, telling the truth, it will be easy for us, for each and every Filipino, Mr. Chair. Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, with the indulgence of the Majority Leader.
Yes?
Salamat, Madam Chair at Majority Leader. Salamat dun sa tanong ni Majority Leader. Actually, nababalik din tayo dun sa unang agenda nitong hearing. Kasi tingin ko, bahagi nung counterpoint nung transparency initiative ng gobyerno natin ay yung influence operations ng China. Na tuwing may ganitong mga insidente at napansin po ng mga researchers ko, pagkatapos nung ginawa nila sa Ayungin Shoal laban sa mga Navy personnel natin, dumami, bumuhos yung mga social media operations nila na talagang gusto nilang baliin yung narrative, impluwensyahan yung opinion environment at itampok yung kanilang gaslighting na naman at yung kanilang imaginary version na naman sa mga pangyayari. So, I just want to thank the good Majority Leader, Madam Chair, dun sa kanyang tanong. At salamat kay DDG Erico.
Yes, maraming salamat. Balikan ko na lang yung kwento dahil maraming nagte-text, maraming nagtatanong kasi nga maraming balita. Last Friday, 21 June, ES Bersamin said that the NMC would recommend the publication of the RORE schedule. Having first said that this would be subject to the approval of the President, spokesperson of PCG Tariela defended the proposal, saying it was not a way of asking permission from China, but merely an announcement to the whole world. Less than 48 hours later, it was reported RORE schedule will not be published. So what is the purpose of publishing the RORE schedule in the first place?
Ma'am, it's merely a recommendation to the President because I think the
Recommended by ES.
NMC.
NMC.
Because we will treat the RORE as a routine and regular activity. It is a Philippine Navy vessel. We need to rotate and resupply. Those were one of the options that came out, but now that
Member of the NMC?
there are principal members, ma'am.
Yes,
So-
I believe it's executive secretary on board and
Yes, it's a collective
then
body.
Secretary Anyo
Yeah.
and yourself as well.
Yes, ma'am.
That being the case, it appears that at first you all agreed. Otherwise,
Ma'am,
no statement would have been
I think
issued.
you'd appreciate, just like committee hearings, committee discussions, the discussions will be privileged, no? In any case,
In any case, you said
In
that
any
it
case,
was a
the-
recommendation of the group at that point in
at
time.
that was a collective decision made. Now, that question now is moot because the president has said that there will be no publication or announcement of any
So
RORE
that's
schedule.
settled.
Yes, ma'am.
It was then reported that the schedule will no longer be published. So has that proposal been rejected outright?
Yes, ma'am.
Even if it's not meant to be interpreted as asking permission from China?
Yes, ma'am. The president has not accepted the recommendation.
Previously, there were statements that 2 days before China would be apprised and so on, even privately or less publicly. Wala nang ganun din
No, ma'am. And insofar as I'm concerned, we never followed that
in the first place.
in that paradigm in the first place.
So, I think so we set that aside. There's no RORE schedule being published publicly or privately.
No, ma'am.
So, okay. So maliwanag na yun. Ngayon, yung isa pang tinatanong, because there have been questions. In fact, many were urging the postponement of this meeting because bilateral talks were being undertaken, country to country, DFA to DFA. Are there military to military talks, PCG to CCG, DFA to China Foreign Ministry? Just yes or no. You don't need to go into the gory detail.
Yes, Chinese foreign ministry, ma'am, but not regular, case by case. But the BCM
Is
has.
this considered a case that deserves such a meeting?
Well, we'll first see yung results of the BCM. If those go well, then we might be in a good position to have a higher level.
Sorry?
If the BCM discussions go well, halimbawa, there's a
DCM, sorry.
the bilateral consultation mechanism
Okay,
for the
BCM.
South China Sea. Kung if the results meeting goes well, we
What
might,
would you consider goes well?
well, if there's some agreements reached on certain
Okay.
issues, there are many issues being considered, not
But
just
until
yung,
then,
we'll like to wait and see, and then if the conditions are
and then
right,
we go up to
then
the
we can go
DFA.
up to a higher
No,
level.
It's just a matter of great
Oh.
reassurance to all of us that you're talking.
Oh, yes, we have
That's all.
regular lines of communication. In fact, I have.
So
Oh.
you're actually awaiting the this bilateral
I would
consultative
like
meetings.
I would like to wait first to see what happens before we do anything.
So you're waiting.
Uh-uh.
Okay, but there's no high level ministry to ministry discussion.
Not planned yet this year.
Is there any DND or
No, ma'am.
AFP?
No, we defer to the DFA.
So
ma'am.
there's no military to military
No, ma'am.
discussion at all.
I have not
When's the
seen
last time you conducted such?
none, ma'am, during my time.
Never.
Never, ma'am.
Okay.
Only
Is there
a
an
visit.
instruction to do so at any point in time?
No, ma'am, until some fundamental fundamental processes have been settled where no recriminations.
What's prudent to simply talk to them, even on an informal basis?
No, ma'am, because they have a tendency of using the talks against us. They have not proven a level of good faith that would warrant our sensitive department to talk to them.
When was the last time, to your knowledge, if it wasn't under your watch, when was the last time there was a military to military discussion? We're all fully aware, of course, that after 15 years, the United States is now talking to China on a military to military basis. I was just curious.
I
Since they're
recall-
our treaty ally, if we are following their example.
I recall, ma'am, that
Diba, a few months ago, I believe there was for the first time after a long, long period, the Chinese military finally speaking to his counterpart in Washington, D.C.
yes, ma'am, but
I
they
was just curious if the Philippines has followed that
no,
example.
ma'am, because they have not displayed a level of trust and confidence that would make myself confident enough to engage them on a fair and level playing field basis.
Okay, so we've understood the DFA is speaking, but on a sub-ministerial level, on a lower level. What about the PCG to the CCG? Are you talking?
Not anymore, ma'am.
But you just said earlier, but you just said earlier that during the Ayungin incident, you were on the radio, male and female, with the Chinese Coast Guard.
Yes, ma'am. It was the ship-to-ship talks, very
Just
tactical.
ship to ship. So it's entirely tactical. There's no higher level.
Yeah. The last time was in 2020.
Sorry.
2021, when the Joint Coast Guard Committee was still existing.
Joint Coast Guard. And why did that end?
It was not renewed, and I think the pandemic has also affected it.
Oo. Kasi nag-pandemic, pero ang tagal na natapos yung pandemic, hindi na na-resume. Okay, thank you. Just by
Madam Chair.
And it has a lifespan of 5 years only.
what has a lifespan of 5 years?
The MOU that allowed it.
Ay, yung MOU tungkol doon, 5-year lifespan. So, pero it hasn't lapsed. Kung 2021, kailan nag-umpisa?
Started in 2016.
2016.
Then 5 years,
So
2021.
yung
have lapsed.
2016, yung 2021 nahuli, no renewal.
No renewal. Pandemic na rin po.
Any intention to talk to the Coast Guard of China?
I think it is a policy decision that is beyond my pay grade.
Sorry, that's beyond your pay grade.
Yes,
Thank you. All right.
Madam
Yes,
Chair.
Senator Risa.
Yamanak, Madam Chair. Kaugnay po nung tanong ni Madam Chair kanina, I appreciate yung sagot ni Sec Teodoro na kahit yung renewed treaty partner natin, ang US, ay kumakausap na sa China, we don't necessarily follow that route. China and the US have their own issues, yung trade war nila, etc., etc. Pero mabuti na we are still capable of making our own decisions towards an independent or even more importantly, an interdependent foreign policy na hindi lamang aligned ulit sa US, pero sa iba pang mga bansa who are like-minded to us dito sa issue ng pushing back against China. So for the record lang, Madam Chair, yung na-appreciate ko yung ganong stance sa ngayon.
Yes, two final issues that have been raised by the public and others in the know. You may or may not answer. There were reports that Chinese warships were actually spotted off Balabac in Palawan, and that they were already inside within the municipal waters of Balabac. Are we able to say yes or no? There are videos being circulated online and elsewhere that appear to prove the same. Is this innocent passage? And if not, how does the Philippine military or even the Coast Guard react? What actions are appropriate to take?
Ma'am,
in
these
this
were
regard?
innocent passage. They were challenged and responded to the challenge.
Again,
The vessels transited an international ceiling,
yes.
and they responded to identification calls pursuant to international practice.
Okay.
So it
they-
was innocent passage.
So
ma'am.
they did. So okay na yan.
Yes, ma'am.
Tapos na yan. So they're gone.
They're gone, ma'am.
But they
They
were
just
there.
traversed. Yes, ma'am. They traversed.
Inside the municipal waters?
Hindi, ma'am. International sea lanes. They were not allowed.
International
Yes,
sea
ma'am.
lane. So mali yung report. Kasi
Mali
yung
po.
una medyo alarmist nasa municipal water.
Hindi po.
Ang lapit kaya no, nakaka-nervous.
Opo, ma'am. Nandun po sa transit
Okay.
lane from, ano ba yun? Yung channel, Sibuto. Sibuto Strait, ma'am.
Sibuto
at saka
Strait.
palabas. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I know Sibuto. Yeah. Thank you. So that's clearly international. Walang problema. And finally, we just like to ask regarding the new bid of the Philippines to extend our continental shelf. Perhaps the DFA can just tell us a little bit about this. How many nautical miles from our baseline? What procedure are we undertaking? And it's been very, very clear that even upon filing, China already protested this action, that it infringes on their sovereignty, China's sovereign rights and jurisdiction. So in one fell swoop, bahala na kayong sumagot.
That's 150 nautical miles, right?
Yes, I
Madam Chair, could I ask ASEC Alpres? He's been handling this issue.
Sige. Sige. Iklian na lang ninyo kasi mag-executive session
ma'am.
na.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mga gutom na yung mga tao rito.
Thank you po, good senators. Just quickly, we submitted our claim for an extended continental shelf of the Western Palawan region. The data was actually collected over a decade and a half of process and data gathering by our scientific working group. But the
It's just
actual
a question
submission.
of data because some perceive it to mean some escalation of tension, di ba? Naasarang inchik eh.
Well, the DFA does not see it that way po.
Sino?
The DFA does not see it that way. I think the fact that we submitted the extended continental shelf claim shows that the Philippines is very committed to what is entitled to us in UNCLOS, and it would be a good platform to show that we are committed to
It's a good platform. So this is more media than legal recourse.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. It's a good platform for, I was going to say, it's a good platform for cooperation.
What was
For
the latest?
cooperation, pero maalma na nga yung mga Chino.
Ma'am, in our view, the China will object, of course, because they feel that that is part of their claim, but we do not feel that they have a legitimate claim to an extended
Chair,
continental
what
shelf.
was the latest?
Why is it cooperation? I'm sorry. In what way will this be cooperation?
the
Knowing
submission-
full well that, as you said, the People's Republic will object.
Yes, ma'am. But China is not the only one who can possibly object because there's a
Because so many
possibility, of
claimants.
course, of that there are overlaps with other claimant countries. But certainly that provides us a way to discuss with other claimant countries a possible
You
way
don't
forward.
think it's a confrontational or even belligerent way to cooperate and discuss?
No, ma'am, we don't take it that way. That is not
They
the
appear
view of the
to. So what do we do?
We will issue a response to their formal diplomatic protest as what was done before.
Yes, for our information, perhaps you can provide us a short executive summary
Yes,
so that the Senate knows what's up with that, because we need to know the procedure and understand what exactly we're claiming. The the reports have been varied, 150 kilometers, 200 additional, et cetera, et cetera. Senator
Yes,
Tolentino, please.
Madam,
Yes, and what was the latest convention the Philippines just ratified? Is this related?
It is the BBNJ agreement, the High Seas Treaty po, which is the third implementing agreement of UNCLOS.
Yes. So the third implementing treaty is likewise related to our submission. Slightly.
Slightly, sir.
Okay.
Okay, Senator
Madam
Ontiveros.
Chair, yes, again, Madam Chair, I think the update given by ASEC Alferez is also good timing dahil kung hindi ako nagkakamali, sinabi ng Vietnam ba yun na handa na rin siyang makipag-usap sa atin tungkol sa competing claims. And we know that Vietnam is one of the most effective in pushing back against China. Not always completely peacefully, pero sana dumami yung mas peaceful na nila, mga engagement nila, but definitely effectively for the Vietnamese national interest. So magandang kasabay nitong Continental Shelf Claim Initiatives, yung bilateral na sana pagkakasundo natin sa Vietnam. Salamat, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. And if there are no further questions, I hope that we can now go into executive session and discuss the other items that Senator Ontiveros and Senator Tolentino wanted to understand better. I will have to request all those not reporting in the executive session to please leave the room.
Recording stopped.
Or nasabi na ni ASEC Alferez. Basta mag-submit na lang kayo
Recording in
para
progress.
may pinanghahawakan.
Madam Chair,
Hindi
kung
kami
pwede rin,
nagsasabi ng mali-mali.
kung
Okay.
pwede rin ako mag-submit in writing ng mga tanong ko pa sa chair na baka Sec Manalo would care to
course.
reply to even after
Of
today po.
course.
Salamat po.
Sige. Media, pakiusap lang.
Record